All right, it's another YouShoot, and only the bravest in the business will do it. I guess you qualify because you're here.
I'm not brave, I'm stupid.
Provocative, brave, what are the other adjectives?
Stupid people will go where brave people fear to tread, and I am here, back with kayfabe commentaries.
Valor and stupidity, is that a fine line?
Another big deal here.
All right, we're here with the deaf-mute Jim Cornette. Let's get started right away. We had about 3 or 4 times the amount.
You didn't tell me we were going to watch porn on this, by the way.
Oh, is that what's up there? Is that virtual?
You don't recognize that?
Is that virtual? The early days is where we will start. And Matt Farmer, courtesy of Kayfabe Memories, says, I really enjoyed Jim's commentary on the Wrestling Gold series. If you remember, but Jim was a huge fan of wrestling as a kid, worked on his newsletters, took pictures, traveled tons of shows. I would like to hear about this period in his life. What were some of his favorite towns to attend as a fan? Some of his favorite wrestlers to watch. Also talk about the involvement in the tape trading newsletter scene, rating the matches with the star system, his work with Norm Dooley on the newsletter, etc. Take it all.
He misspelled etc. But we won't worry about that. Well, obviously when I was a wrestling fan, it was the 70s, you know, and there was no internet, there was no national television. It was all territories, wrestling magazines, how you heard about people. And when I started taking pictures in 76 or whatever, it was a real, communication was very primitive. And I remember that in the Memphis territory, just to give an example, the same matches in Louisville, at the Louisville Gardens on Tuesday night, with the same results would be presented in Evansville, Indiana, 130 miles down the road, on Wednesday night, and nobody knew. You could change the title in every town in the territory every night, and nobody would know except the people that saw the, you know, every once in a while somebody would go on summer vacation and go to the matches in Memphis, and then those people were scarred for life. But I love going to the Louisville Gardens. I was there every Tuesday night of my life from 1974 to the time I got into business in 1982, and then I started getting booked there. Lexington, Rupp Arena. I got to go to the Omni in Atlanta. Went to the Mid-South Coliseum starting in 77 when Jerry Jarrett took over the promotion from Nick Goulas, and his first big super card, double main event, Jack Briscoe versus Jerry Lawler for the Southern title and Harley Race and Rocky Johnson for the NWA title. And I went down and shot pictures, which I still have. You know, just all of the Southern wrestling. My one disheartening thing was I always wanted to go to Cincinnati Gardens, because from the time I was like 9 or 10, see, I would plan my family vacations around the wrestling shows. If I went to see my Aunt Lola and Uncle Tommy in Covington, Kentucky, that's right across the river from Cincinnati, so I got to see the Sheik's show. So we're talking the Sheik and Bobo and Mighty Igor and you know, they always plug Cincinnati Gardens. Cincinnati Gardens, you got to be there. Well, Cincinnati Gardens was 25 miles away, even in a bad neighborhood even then. So I couldn't get my mom and my aunt and everybody to go. And finally, my mom said, well, I'll take you. And it's 1975 by this point. Well, I didn't know that the peak of the Sheik's territory was 71, 72, 73. It's Abdullah the Butcher versus the Sheik, as a matter of fact, and there's 300 people in the Cincinnati Gardens, and I was just disheartened. But then also got to go to the Expo Center in Indianapolis, because Bruiser's territory, right, which constituted the state of Indiana, once again, Indianapolis was on fire in the early 70s when I first started watching the TV on Channel 4 from Bloomington. When Channel 3 in Louisville would go off the air, you know, you could get Channel 4 in, right? And so then later on, when I've jacked up the big antenna on top of the house, the story has been written everywhere, I could get Bruiser's TV from Indianapolis, Sheik's TV from Cincinnati, the Jarrett show, obviously the Memphis show from Louisville, and Nick Goulas from Bowling Green, etc., etc. So finally, around 1975, I get to go see Bruiser's show at the Expo Center, but the peak of Bruiser's territory had been 74, so it was still, there were several thousand people there.
So what was the main event?
Well, I saw a bunch, because Indianapolis was easier to go to, but I remember I got to see Bruiser and Crusher against the Bounty Hunters in the, it was a lumberjack match, but they had some other kind of name for it, the Beer Drinkers Brawl, where everybody had the bowler hats on like in the bar. But I did see at the Market Square Arena, the big building, the Christmas Spectacular with Sheik against Bruiser after they had settled the promotional war, and Sheik brings out the snake, like this is new shit, right, with Jake. Sheik brings this snake out, it's going to be a 10-foot snake, and he cleared the entire section of ringside out, because everybody was convinced that this guy was a madman, and I mean, there were grown men leaping over chairs. But it was even more panic than in Louisville Gardens when we took my Aunt Lola, bless her, to see the show one night, and the Wrestling Bear was there. Gentleman Ben, the Wrestling Bear. So here comes Nick Adams leading Gentleman Ben, the Wrestling Bear, down the aisle. And we looked around, and there was Aunt Lola as far down the other aisle. She jumped up and run off, and a guy sitting next to her took off with her. Anyway, I loved going to all those towns when I was a fan, because you got to see different wrestlers, different territories, different promotions, different styles. Back up now. There were more
newsletters.
The newsletters. The newsletters started out as fan club bulletins, because every wrestler that stayed in a particular territory for a period of time, had their own fan clubs. And Georgianne Macropolis had the Bruno Sammartino and Buddy Rogers fan club. So I joined all of them. Not necessarily that I joined the Pedro Morales fan club. Not necessarily that I was a fan.
That was you then.
Exactly, of all these people. But I wanted all the newsletters, because the newsletters had results. And from all over the world, and had pictures and blah, blah, blah. So I joined all that, and then where they got with Norm Dooley, my friend Norman Dooley, and I haven't seen him in years, don't know where we lost touch as I moved away, but he was a big fan in Louisville. And he lived across the river in southern Indiana, so he got TBS before we ever even had cable available to us, because it was a different state, different deal. So I would go over on Saturday nights to his house and watch Georgia Championship Wrestling, the Freebirds, the pile driver angle, and with DiBiase, and then he got Madison Square Garden cable network. So, and then we found out that the Madison Square Garden shows are going to be available on cable. We can watch them in our own home, and we're thinking, oh my God, because we've read the magazines, right? But this was before videotape. You had never seen these people. So boy, I got over there early that Monday night, and we sit down, and my God, it's going to be Bob Backlund versus I can't even remember who in this whole Madison Square Garden card. And we got the bowl of potato chips, we got the popcorn, we got the soft drinks, and we're watching, and we're watching, and we're watching. And at the end of the night, we turned and looked at each other. This was supposed the Madison Square Garden, the mecca of wrestling. Every wrestling show, every Tuesday night at the Louisville Gardens in Louisville, Kentucky, was more exciting, bloodier, wilder, and better matches than the mecca of wrestling. It almost led us to inflict self-harm on ourselves. We were like, because there was a balloon popped. But Norman Dooley started sending out the results of the Louisville matches and the spot shows up around the Louisville area. Because remember, we were going to 3 shows a week and didn't have to drive more than 100 miles to go 3 shows a week live. He would do a newsletter, and not even a newsletter, he just mimeograph. That's, well, it was back then. Xerox, that's outdated too, ditto machine, whatever. A big legal size piece of paper, and he'd type up, and he started giving his opinions on the matches. And he was a witty, funny guy. And he kind of knocked things here and there. He put this over. Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler was great, and Chief Jay Strongbow not so much, whatever. And one day I'm talking to him on the phone, and this probably will give me tons of heat, but you know what? I'm old. I'm almost retired. I don't give a shit who likes it. I said to Norman, because he sent this out to like 35 or 40 people, because you would trade programs, you would trade results, you would trade clippings from the news, newspapers. All the wrestling fans, because there was no internet and there was no organized society and no wrestling stores, they do it themselves. I said, Norman, get to the point of this story, too late. I said, you ought to, I'm reading the TV Guide while I'm talking to him, and he said, yeah, and I went to, because he used to go to St. Louis a lot. His mom would take him to St. Louis. Back, nobody had a driver's license back then, by the way. I said, Norman, I'm reading the TV Guide. I said, what you ought to do is you ought to rate these matches like the TV Guide does the movies, right? Give it 1 star, instead of saying, oh, crummy match or great match or good match or whatever, just give it stars. I'm jacking off. I don't think he's going to do this. So with the next letter, he rated them stars. And then as he sent those out over the next several weeks, people started saying, yeah, we really like that. Now we've got some type of, but then it just took off, and and Meltzer started doing it. Yeah. And it was ridiculous. And I mean, wrestling, like art or music, is subjective. What you like might not necessarily be what I like. And that's, I've seen some of my favorite movies. The movie 4 Rooms, the Quentin Tarantino thing with Tim Roth in it. On the Cable Guide, he gets 1 star. I happen to think it's the funniest movie ever made. So, but still now. And then who among you have the right, you think you have the right and the knowledge to rate these matches by stars. Only Norman Dooley had that knowledge and that right.
He made me watch
You are usurpers to the Norman. I called him Weasel Dooley. His newsletter was Weasel's World of Wrestling, because he had the glasses and he looked a little bit like John Denver, but we made, you know. Okay. Anyway. So that was the first question. I guess now we're out of time.
Yeah, Jim, if we're doing 10 minutes, you're going to be here for a couple of weeks. You better call Karen. Nico, courtesy of WrestlingClassics.com. How was Memphis during the photography days? Were the guys cool to you? How well was kayfabe kept in the more gimmicky style that they used at the time?
Okay, the guys were all great. Well, there's a few exceptions. There's always an SOB in every crowd. But no, the guys were great. They were making money off my pictures because we sold them at the souvenir stand. They got publicity. So naturally, you know, plus Christine Jarrett had given me the blessing to be at ringside, so that was all you needed. Kayfabe was weird because, well, first of all, I was never allowed in the locker room until my first day at Memphis TV, because I was never, only then it doesn't matter whether you were a photographer or whatever. In the Memphis territory, people on the card, wrestlers, referees, and anybody in the office got in the locker room. Cops didn't get in the locker room. And Pat Malone was sitting in Louisville and Memphis. Pat Malone, the Green Shadow, the toughest old timer in the world, was sitting at the locker room to make sure that a door to make sure nobody, you know, snuck back there. And I remember one time there was a big metal folding door at the back of the Louisville Gardens, and it was a track on the top but not on the bottom. It kind of swung. And as I'm walking back after the show, suddenly I see a guy fly into that thing, bam, and knock it out, and there's a huge noise, and he rolled all the way to the wall, and Pat Malone flings the thing open, said, "I told you to stay out of the locker room." The guys could not, like Troy Graham, the Dream Machine, and Bobby Fulton, who were close friends of mine that before I got into business, because they used to ride with us, and you know, I would, then when I got in the business, I'd bring Troy up to Louisville with me because he lived in Memphis. We were making the trip. Before I got in the business, they would acknowledge that I was smart, but most of the guys, and of course Lawler would tell me things that I needed to know or places I needed to be to get pictures or whatever, but no, they didn't say anything to me, and I didn't tell them I was smart. As a matter of fact, the first day that Jerry Jarrett asked me, "Do you want to be a manager?" he said, "My mother tells," and I'd never told Christine Jarrett I was smart, but she knew.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, saw her 3 days a week. She stayed at the house and was friends with my mom. But Jerry Jarrett said, "My mother tells me you're smart to our business." And I'm like, oh, shit. Because now either I'm going to say yes, he's going to say, "Fine, fuck it, get out of here," or I'm going to say no, and he's going to think I'm an idiot, or I'm going to say, I don't know what to say. And finally I said, "Well, yes." "Good, because I'd like to see if you want to be a," I'm like, "Oh, thank God." But no, you did, you know, kayfabe was strictly enforced, which was better for everybody. The state athletic commissioner, Pat Malone, would have thrown him out if he'd tried to go in the locker room. You know, anyway,
different time.
And the more gimmicky style that they actually, Nico, courtesy of Wrestling Classics, what can be more gimmicky than what you're seeing right now on television? Actually, Memphis wrestling in the 1970s and 80s looks like the UFC compared to the fucking horse tripe you're looking at on fucking television these days. So, not to knock your question or anything.
SJK 2005, courtesy of F4WOnline.com, wants us to ask Jim, which was a bigger indication that you'd arrived, your first paycheck, first fight with a fan, or first rat?
Wait a minute, arrived where? Arrived in wrestling.
Yeah.
First paycheck, first fight with a fan, or first rat? Well, actually, I think it was my first day on television, just because I'm sitting there and the guys are cool with me because I've known them all for years, but now I'm actually at Channel 5. The first time I heard the term high spot was when I was in the locker room at Channel 5 television ready to do my first TV. Because people didn't talk smart, there was no internet. The newsletters were kayfabe newsletters. The old Wrestling Fans Convention, you know, when all the fans would come from Wrestling Fans International Association, they'd come from all over the place, you know, to the host city and see, you know, the shows in that place. And some of the fans were smart, some of the fans weren't. So the fans that were smart would kind of feel the other ones out, and if they weren't smart, then they'd kayfabe them. Because the fan, they didn't want to smart other people up. So anyway, back to the question. When I'm at Memphis television and I'm hearing all these words that I don't know what the fuck they mean, but now I can tell by context, either the snow's falling off the roof or we're next to the Newark airport or something. My first paycheck was $50. I managed Dutch Mantel against Jerry Lawler for the Southern title in the main event, No, I'm sorry, that was my second paycheck. First one was the Cook Convention Center match. That was $50. The second one, Southern title, managed Dutch Mantel versus Jerry Lawler at Mid-South Coliseum, that was $75.
$75?
Yeah, so I didn't think I'd arrived anywhere at that, but I was pleased to do it because I would have done it for free. First fight with a fan was in Evansville, Indiana. Me and Jimmy Hart had a handicap match against some babyface, maybe Terry Taylor, Coco Ware, can't remember who, and somehow or another they didn't beat me and Jimmy up bad enough because then some drunk guy from Evansville came and took a swing at me and thankfully missed me and then hit Jimmy. And the first rat we won't go into because actually I wasn't even in the business yet and we won't go there. But
Greg Pike, did you enjoy working with JYD?
Yes, very much. JYD, especially in Mid-South, JYD, he was the king of the territory. It was like Lawler in Memphis or like Vernon in Minneapolis or Crusher in Milwaukee. He was the guy, and he was a great promo at the time. His work was never the best, but at the same time people believed in him, and this was when he was really in shape. And also he was a great guy, you know, and we never had a lick of trouble, and I always liked JYD. Personally, professionally, whatever.
Brad Dykins from OnlineWorldOfWrestling.com. Do you have any specific memories of Hercules Hernandez when he was your bodyguard protecting you from Hacksaw Duggan?
Hercules Hernandez was a great guy, and what's the funniest? I can tell he saved my life in Houston. We'd done a deal where I got my head shaved, right? And so I was wearing a mask. And at the end of every match that I would manage Herc against Hacksaw Duggan, Duggan would somehow pop my mask off so people would see me with bald hair, and then we'd grab the mask back and run off. Well, as I grabbed the mask and we're running down the aisle, some fan snatches it and takes off down like the fourth row ringside. And I lost my head because I'm thinking, it's my only mask. And I've run and I catch the guy and grab him, I kick him in the balls and snatch the mask back, and I look around, I am in the middle of ringside. And I see knives coming out and people are tying hangman's nooses and pulling out. You know, it looked that way. Actually, they were going to beat the shit out of me. All of a sudden, here comes a guy over my head, and here's Hercules, and grabbed me up under his arm, and with one hand was carrying me, and with the other hand was pie-facing fans till we got out of ringside. Or another time, he and Dr. Death were a heel tag team in Houma, Louisiana. They beat up ringside, everybody. As the people, for some reason the people came in formation, like synchronized swimming or something. As we're going down the aisleway, they came in reverse order. The people that were on the end of the first row started, then the second row, then the third row. So I've got Doc's football helmet, and I'm backing up behind Dr. Death and Hercules. And people are flying. And I'm just, every time somebody kind of peeks through, beep, with the football helmet, and we get back to the locker room. They've threw 15 people out of the way. Doc and Herc beat up a bar in Alexandria one night. Pee Wee Anderson, the referee, jumps up on the bar and rips his shirt off, starts doing the Hulk Hogan pose while Doc and Herc beat up 12 guys. But my favorite Hercules Hernandez story, coming back from Jackson, Mississippi. It was probably, I guess it was November, so it got down to like freezing at night down there. So it's cold, and I'm driving by myself because I'd come from interviews that Midnight Express had come from somewhere else. So we're all headed back to Alexandria. And Herc lived in Alexandria too, and at the time his girlfriend, I can't remember her name, but she traveled with him, and also they had like 2 or 3 cats that traveled in the back seat. He had one of those old big, you know, Lincoln or Cadillac, what big long car, you know, you had to pay 2 parking meters. So anyway, I'm driving down the road, and all of a sudden I look up and there's this big long car, and the door, the driver door is open, and it's driving down it wasn't even an emergency lane. This wasn't an interstate. It was just a fucking pull-off lane. And the door's not open like normal. It's open at a complete perpendicular 90-degree angle. And I'm like, what the fuck? And as I pull up, I roll down my window on that side. It's Herc and his girlfriend and the cats. Herc, is there a problem? What's going on? He says, oh, Jimmy pulls over. He says, Jimmy, he says, I needed to take a piss, so I stopped and started to get out, and a truck came along and whacked the door. He said, if I hadn't been holding on to it, it might have taken the whole thing off.
So he just continued to drive?
He just drove that way, yeah. Well, it was 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Mississippi. What are you going to do? But just the fact that he was holding onto the door and that's the best the truck could do, to me indicate that was hurt. Well, another story. Did I tell this story on the last one? Maybe not. Herc's doing a run-in in Baton Rouge at Centroplex. And me and Crusher Darso, Khrushchev, Barry Darso, Demolition, whichever name, are standing back watching. It's Butch reading somebody. Herc's going to run in and attack the babyface. And as he gets down the aisleway, it's always happened at the ringside aisleway. He gets almost to the barricade to jump over, and some guy comes out and tackles him around the waist to keep him from going in and hurting the babyface. So he just went like that, into the ring. The cops bring the guy back and they sit him in a chair. So me and Darso are here looking out the door, and it's a 2-swinging door thing in Centroplex. And over there, the one plainclothes cop is sitting with the guy who now realizes he's going to be arrested. And Darso just looked at him and said, "I'd hit you, but I can't possibly hit you as hard as he's going to hit you when he comes back here." And sure enough, as soon as Herc was done, he comes in, he busts through those swinging doors like John Wayne going into the saloon. And the guy stood up about to say, "I'm sure sorry," or whatever the fuck he was going to say. And Herc, open-handed slap. Came around like this, caught him right up under there. I saw the guy's feet leave the ground. He was this far from the wall, his head flies into the concrete wall, smack, and then he dropped, smack. So it was like smack, 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 boom, and he's laying there like that, and he's done. One slap. So now the bell's ringing, me and the Midnight Express got to go wrestle. So we step over the fucking guy, go to the ring, have a 20-minute match, come back. The guy's laying in the exact same position. The cops are standing around him, and you hear the ambulance siren. Right? They're coming to pick him up and cart him out. I go to Herc, I said, "Herc, why did you just slap him if you were that mad?" He said, "Oh, Jimmy, hit somebody with your fist, you could hurt him." Hercules Hernandez.
Guitar Dude, Figure 4 Wrestling Online. Your favorite, almost got killed in Louisiana.
Oh, Christ. Well, there were a bunch of different riots and things going on where the cops were fighting with us on our side. Well, a couple times they weren't exactly on our side, but even though it's a big fight and people are hitting you and you're whacking people with shit, and I tried mace, but that didn't work because it was never one person coming at you. It was a mob coming at you, and you couldn't direct it. So then I started carrying a chain in my pocket that I could whip out, and it was taped up, one of those dog chains, but heavy enough that I could whack somebody and get them off of you. Then I started loading the racket. But in the buildings, you always had cops, and they were fighting too, whether it be with the sticks or whatever. We got the Tulsa police force Tulsa City Police kicked out of doing security for wrestling matches because the internal affairs investigated, because one time we had a riot so bad when they nightsticked a bunch of the people and took them to jail. One of the guy was a son of a highway patrolman and caused a problem. But in the building, even though all this shit was going on, you had cops with you, so you're thinking, like, maybe I'm not going to get killed. I mean, I had the bulletproof vest that I got from the cops in Little Rock for Tulsa and Little Rock sometimes and shit, because I didn't think they'd shoot me, but they said it would help with knives. You couldn't get cut, which that was a real comfort. The cop came up to me and said, "We just got new vests, so if you'd like, to buy my used one, because, we don't think they're going to shoot you." But these were his words. "But knifing is a concern here." Great, okay. But probably, even though we had more physical damage in some of these other fucking deals, the time where we probably could have got killed the quickest was Houma, Louisiana, which is so far down. Our Cajun girls selling merchandise couldn't understand what the people were saying, right? And it's just a horrible place. South of New Orleans, you got to go north to get south. So anyway, me and Dennis Condrey are leaving. Bobby Eaton was riding with Bill Dundee that night. So we're leaving, and we're in my car. And as we're putting our stuff in the trunk out back of the building, here was 12 Cajuns that had had a few cocktails and decided they didn't like the Midnight Express. And this shit started happening real quick. We're trying to get I got the boom box. We had to carry our own boom box because we were the only people that had music back then, us and dogs, so we had to carry our own shit with us. So I'm putting the boom box, I got the tennis racket, I got my suit bag. Dennis got his wrestling bags, we're throwing it in the trunk. This guy comes up and says something to Dennis. He's got all his buddies with him, and so he wants to prove a point. He's gonna fuck with the big time wrestler, blah blah blah, and show off in front of his buddies. And Dennis said, you know, being the personable guy, he said something like, "Fuck you, motherfucker." So the guy had an unopened beer can, and he chucked it at Dennis, and Dennis ducked it, grabbed his wrist, barred his arm, put him down in the concrete, kicked him in the face. His friends didn't like that. Here they come. I'm standing there with a tennis racket. And Dennis, there's 12 of them. I got Dennis Condry. I figure if there was 6, I'd be fine, but there's fucking 12. Here we go. We're dead. The Rock and Roll Express down the parking lot fucking turned their car on, saw this, hit the bright lights, and drove into the crowd of fans where they all went, ah! And we jumped in the car and fucking took off. So that, I mean, who knows? I have no idea how we did not get serious.
Robert Gibson to the rescue again.
I think Ricky was driving. No, I'm sorry.
He usually sells. Alex Goff, courtesy of 54 Online. Why do you think the Midnights weren't given a run with the Von Erichs?
We have thought about that. You know, Dennis at one point had heard that Fritz said, "Oh, those guys are too small to work with my boys." But Bobby and Dennis physically looked as impressive or more so than Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. You know, I don't know whether we actually gave our notice first night in to World Class because we had been scheduled to go to work for Crockett, and because when they told us we were finishing up in Mid-South, we didn't really, you know, they didn't say we're going to book you anywhere else. So Dusty and Flair had both asked us if we wanted to come to work for Crockett. So I called Crockett, made the deal. We got a start date. This is explained in the book Midnight Express and Jim Cornette 25th Anniversary Scrapbook, available at jimcornette.com. But anyway, so we went over there and we looked at it and we said, well, it's not as big a talent roster. They don't have, you know, even though they have the syndicated television, they don't have the, you know, TBS, etc., like Crockett does. So we gave our notice, and then Dundee calls it, "Oh, Watts really wants you to go to Dallas because then you can come back for the Superdome, you can come back for Oklahoma City and Tulsa." Okay, so then we rescinded our notice and, you know, told Crockett we'd come later, which we did. Maybe they were upset about that. Maybe it was the fact, and I think this was probably the majority of it, that Gino and Chris had homesteaded. And you know what homesteading is. Mm-hmm. Okay. When you homesteaded a territory, basically, you either went into a territory and you liked it so much, or they liked you so much, or you did such great business, or you just kissed so much ass, all of those apply, that you moved there. That became your home. You homesteaded the territory. You did not leave. You did everything you could to keep your spot right there because it was more convenient or more money or more satisfying or whatever. So Gino and Chris had homesteaded the Von Erichs. I mean, they shadowed them. You know, it was Kerry versus Gino and Kevin versus Chris, or vice versa, or in tag matches. And then One Man Gang was there with Gary Hart. And Gary was even, he could not understand. I talked to him a couple of years ago at the Charlotte convention. Me and Dennis both were like, "Why didn't you guys ever get a run with the Von Erichs?" Don't know, Gary, because he was not in the booking office at that point. But he was managing One Man Gang, you know, with Kerry. We were there 6 months. We worked with the Fantastics for 6 months. And Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, they were a great team, and the matches were much better than we'd had with the Von Erichs, but the money wasn't. And Bobby and Tommy didn't have any control over that. If we had a 4-match card, which all the spot shows were, you would go a single match, a captain's match, which meant one of the tag team guys would wrestle a single, then one of the Von Erichs versus either Gino or Chris or Gang in the main event, and then the tag match on last. Even though the main event with the Von Erichs got main event money, then the tag match is on last. So that means 2, 4, 10, referee, 12 guys on the card. We'd do $16,000, $18,000, and we get $200, $250. But the main event would get 5 or 6 or 7, and sometimes it'd be 15 minutes from the house. So the point is, the difference in what we were getting in the tag team program over the tag team titles with the Fantastics and what the guys who worked with the Von Erichs were getting was the difference between the $50,000 a year we were going to make if we stayed there and the $100,000 a year the guys like the Freebirds made. And after 6 months, we said, it ain't going nowhere. We've had 4 matches with the Von Erichs. We're going to work for Crockett. And the closing straw was the check from Texas Stadium, which I reproduce in the Jim Cornette and Midnight Express 25th Anniversary Scrapbook, available at jimcornette.com. basically, we were in the tag team title match, the America's tag team title match in Texas Stadium, 20-something thousand people, $250,000 gate. We got $1,100 a piece. We got together and said, what the fuck? Jimmy Crockett, Midnight Express calling, and we gave our notice and left. We couldn't wait anymore. It was a paid vacation, whatever.
Rock when done, was Fritz von Erich really as cheap as they say he was?
Actually, the territory was, I can't say Fritz was cheap. The territory was run on a shoestring because it had always been run on a shoestring, and then suddenly, Gary Hart, as is told in his book, manipulated the Freebirds and Von Erich's angle, and it exploded like nobody ever dreamed it would, and actually the territory got too big for the infrastructure. There was no way that this office with 6 full-time employees and that had always been used to running the Sportatorium on Friday and Fort Worth on Monday and the spot shows. Now they're running the Cotton Bowl and Texas Stadium and selling out, Reunion Arena. They didn't realize it was going to get that hot, and then once it got that hot, they couldn't really follow up on it, because after you had the Freebirds and Von Erichs for 2 years, every night and twice a week in the Metroplex, they couldn't follow it, so it started getting smaller again, and then then we know what happened from there.
Okay, WCW, Unmistakable Jimmy. Was Big Mama from Starrcade 85 really Jimmy Valiant's wife/girlfriend? Are they still together?
Yes and no. Felicia. Big Mama was Felicia, and they are not still together. Jimmy has been married, I guess, about 20 years now or so, to a very nice woman named Angel. I don't know where Felicia is. They were together for some time. Don't know where she is now, and I stay out of other people's marital situations, so I will leave it at that.
Very good. Justin and Erica was making fun of David Crockett on WCW. As fun as it looked. Sometime around Christmas 1986, you came out for an interview segment, as was the norm at that time, with a piece of paper and told Crockett that it was an enrollment to the Columbia Broadcasting School and suggested he make use of it.
I also said, when I just pointed at him one time, said, see what happens when the fetus doesn't get enough oxygen. It was so, I liked David, and David was just, he was so, I don't want to use the word pompous with his honor. He had to be a baby face. And David, I'd say that David had to be a baby face to the point of not wanting to back up or even act like he was offended by the heels and everything. And I used to blister him because he'd just stand there and you could tell he's kind of burning, and some of his commentary, like when it was the Superstars on the first TBS special, Superstars on the Superstation, I think was it Ronnie Garvin and Ric Flair on that one? And Garvin grabs Flair, he does the old deal where he twists his nose like that and slaps it, and David's like, he's got him by the hunker. Or when Riggy Morton had the belt and was about to whip me, whip him like a dog. He had to be so baby-faced. It was just so easy to stick David. One time, we're at TBS, and he got really hot at me, because this was right when, it was either when Madonna and Sean Penn had broken up, or when Joan Collins and her husband Peter Holm had broken up. Because I used to try to push it a little bit, see what I could say on TBS back when you couldn't cuss or say anything out of the way on wrestling. I said, Sweet Stan Lane, the gangster of love, he's the women's pet, the men's regret. I said, for example, Madonna and Sean Penn broke up, Sweet Stan could be Madonna's next Sean. Joan Collins and Peter Holm broke up, Sweet Stan could be Joan Collins' next Peter. You never know what David's, oh, you can't say that. I said, they're Christian names, David, Christian names. And I used to say this edgy shit, and he'd come back and he'd be like, you can't say that, they're going to kick us off the air. I'm totally innocent.
Excellent. Brad Dykens, Online World of Wrestling. What are your thoughts on Lex Luger when he started out in the business, then at the height of his success? Lastly, what do you think of Lex now?
I always got along with Package. Lex was never a wrestling fan. For example, I sat next to him one time on a plane. We were in first class. He got a first class ticket, and I used my frequent flyer $30 upgrade. And we're sitting next to each other, and just for conversation, I said, Package, I said, you used to play football in Memphis. Did you ever watch the Memphis wrestling show? And he said, well, it used to be on, when we'd come back from practice on Saturday morning or whatever, but I never watched wrestling. He didn't realize how he came off sometimes to some people. He was a very educated guy, and the total package. He was educated, he had the body and the genetics and everything. he didn't realize that he came off some like superior sometimes. Because I said, well, what would you have done, just for fun and giggles, I said, what would you have done if you'd have had to work in Memphis for, at that time, the late 80s, it was, guys were making $300 a week there. The big money had been previously. And he said, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Well, I understood, and I didn't have a problem with it, but a lot of times he would say, well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, it's to a guy who was doing that. Well, why are you fucking better than me? So I think the thing that hurt Lex in the business was that he was so intelligent and so good looking and had a big contract, the first big contract that Crockett ever gave out. He came off as aloof to the people and like he really didn't mean what he was saying, because he wasn't a wrestling fan, he wasn't into the business, he just didn't have the emotion that you would have if you, like Flair, who loved the business and bled and sweat and everything, breathed and slept the business. Lex just didn't connect with people. He seemed like he was kind of above them. But he was fun. One time we're driving to someplace, a WCW show. Bobby is standing in the back, I'm driving, and Lex is in the front seat, and we stopped at Wendy's. And Lex got like a baked potato, right? I got to triple. Extra cheese, extra mayo, the grease is down to me, and I'm fucking driving, I'm gnawing on this thing, and he's looking at me like I got a steaming turd hanging out of my mouth. And I said, package, how long has it been since you've had a cheeseburger? He said, well, Jimmy, I had some French fries about 6 months ago. I said, your body would just go into some kind of anaphylactic shock if you fucking, But I said, one of these days, I guess cholesterol will catch up with me. And by the way, it finally did. I'm almost 50, but it's only 203. But we got to stop these things before they get too far. But anyway, Lex, I like Lex. I saw him last a couple years ago at the Charlotte convention. He's had a lot of health problems, and I don't know. He had so many health problems. You couldn't connect it to steroids or any one thing. Like he didn't take a ton of bumps, but he did take bumps over the years. But not to that extent. But he had the paralyzation from the compressed thing or what, I don't know. I'm not his doctor, but it's sad to see a guy who was so physically impressive be sidelined like that. But I understand he's a happier guy personally now.
Okay. So Joano Barros.
Boy, he's really trying to hurry me up.
I gotta get you. We got good stuff coming, buddy.
It takes me an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
How do you make a watch again? Who is a better partner for Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey or Stan Lane?
Oh, you fucking troublemaker.
That's got to be there. It's got to be there.
Well, see, I'm not trying to pick my favorite children, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible so I can drone on about the fucking rest of the questions. I think that Dennis Condrey was a better heel. I think that Stan Lane was a flashier worker. I think that Bob Eaton and Dennis Condrey were better for Mid-South Wrestling and for the early time that we were working with the NWA, but when we were positioned as the top tag team that had to get heat and had to draw money. Dennis Condrey's work, there's never been anybody work anything like him. He was so precise, no wasted motion, everything crisp. He was in the right place at the right time. He never made a false step. But at the same time, when Stan came along, that's when pay-per-view came along, and the national television and the main event matches on TV. And Stan's a pretty motherfucker, no doubt about it. I mean, Stan Lane is a good-looking guy and just tremendous genetics and looks nowhere near his age even today. So he was flashier for when we didn't need to get so much heat. When it was about having Dennis and Bobby had great matches too, but they concentrated on getting heat and selling tickets. With Stan, we were put in a position where we were to have the great match of the show. And with the other great tag teams, so whether it be the Rock and Roll of the Fantastics or Tully and Arn or, whatever, Stan and Bobby got the chance to develop more teamwork, and plus there's more evidence of them on tape, because in the early days with Dennis, the house shows weren't taped. So anyway, for the time, each one were best for their...
You did that well.
It's true.
You did
it's
well.
True. I'm not trying to weasel out of anything. Read the next
Scott Crone. Why on earth was Starrcade 87 moved from Georgia to fucking Chicago? And why was the entire show a flop given the talent booked? The entire show was horrible and had such great talent. It's one of those so bad it's good shows, but seriously, what the fuck?
Well, Starrcade 87 was moved from Greensboro and Georgia. 85 and 86 had been half in Atlanta, Omni, half in Greensboro Coliseum. Originally it was a Greensboro show entirely. But then they did the closed circuit thing, boom, boom, boom. But in Starrcade 87, well, Crockett had just purchased the UWF, and he had snapped up Kansas, I think Florida and Kansas City at that point, and Vince was expanding, and WrestleMania 3 had been on pay-per-view, and point is, they went to Jim Crockett and sold him on the idea that here's Vince McMahon coming from New York City and we're coming from Greensboro. Nobody knows where Greensboro is. Or Atlanta. We need to be in a big major market metropolitan media area. So we were selling out in Chicago, sold out like 9 straight shows at the USC Pavilion. So they moved Starrcade to Chicago because it was going to be on pay-per-view. Well, as everybody knows, and I'm not going to try to answer a question by giving the entire 20 years past history of wrestling, Vince fucked Starrcade 87 by coming up with the Survivor Series and telling people, the cable companies, if you carry the NWA pay-per-view, you can't have WrestleMania. So everybody went back on their fucking promise except for 5 cable companies. So they went from doing 16,000 people in Atlanta and $300 and something thousand the year before, and 20,000 people and $380,000 in Greensboro the year before for the same show the same night. They sold out the Greensboro Coliseum in '86 and closed-circuited the building next door. That's how big it was. So they went from a live gate of $600 and something thousand and 2 sellouts plus closed-circuit audience to a sellout in Chicago of $180,000 and 5 cable companies carrying the pay-per-view. And to be quite honest, our payoff for Starrcade 87 was the same as for Starrcade 86 because we had another scaffold match with the Rock and Roll Express that didn't go nearly as good as with the Road Warriors, not because of the scaffold matches or the shits. It wasn't the Rock and Roll's fault. They had seen it. You shouldn't see another one for quite a while. We saw another one a year later. And the whole thing just fell in a fucking hole. Basically is what the problem was. So Chicago, a great town, but we didn't need to leave Greensboro and Atlanta for Chicago, for the big media market. Didn't work anyway. And that was the start of Vince fucking up the deal. So then that's what led to, against WrestleMania, the first TBS Clash of Champions live. And we took away some people from Vince and had the match where he made Sting the following March. And then the cable companies all got together and said, fuck you guys, you're costing us money, don't run against each other.
Greg Pike, did Animal really babysit Hawk over the years?
No, that Hawk had his issues, but I think actually if you want to phrase Paul Ellering probably took care of both of them better than anything. So I can't really, I can't go
Very
along
good.
with that.
Rich Eldridge, pro wrestling historian. He very proudly boasts. Jim, how do you think Crockett and Dusty should have and could have handled Crockett purchasing UWF from Cowboy Bill Watts?
Well, it's much the same as the guest booker, the excellent guest booker with Jim Cornette DVD, which is available from kayfabecommentaries.com.
Is there anyone that doesn't own it yet? I can't imagine that being the case.
Actually, I think there's some Bolivian peasants that have yet to. Once again, there was some great talent there. The UWF territory had a problem because of the financial situation that led Watts to sell to Crockett in the first place. The oil bust in his core territory. He had tried to expand his syndication. But the talent was still excellent. Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Terry Taylor, Ted DiBiase was still there. I believe that's when he took off and went up north. If they had been presented as equal threats to the Crockett guys, it would. But I'm more surprised that Dusty didn't go into a big invasion angle than I am that Vince didn't, because Vince is so fucking pompous. And everybody that works for him, they think that the only thing that's ever been done well in wrestling was done there, elsewise it didn't count. But Dusty knew a lot of these guys. He knew the territories. He knew the situation. I wasn't in the office then, so I don't know, but it surprised me.
Steve Jordan, while we're on wrestling historians, do you think the work that wrestling historians do to preserve history is worthwhile, or do you agree with Bruce Mitchell that real historians don't just stop with finding old newspaper clippings and match results?
Well, I never agree with Bruce Mitchell on anything, including the fact that he's still breathing. However, having said that, no, real historians don't just stop with finding old newspaper clippings and match results, but, nobody said that they did, or at least I haven't heard it. I think that, the book on the National Wrestling Alliance by Tim Hornbacher,
yes,
is one of my favorite books, because here's a guy from outside the business who did his homework and did his research, and drew a compelling picture of the way that organized wrestling was formed, and the way that the NWA was formed, and I think there are books like that out there, just like there are shitty books. So, you know, you got to find a guy that did his homework and got down and got the stories, and then other times people are, oh, here's a clipping from Oshkosh in 1956. Look, Crusher's in the main event. Well, you know.
Could you talk about Bruce Mitchell for another 20 minutes, please?
You skipped over Lyle Zay Doe. I saw that name.
Well, what? It's the. Do you have any Ron Dixon writes? Do you have any memory stories or nightmares about learning the ropes? Do you remember it? We can refresh your memory here.
Well, no, I remember it.
Okay.
I remember it. Stan Lane was on that show. Are you going to show this clip?
I can't. That's why I skipped the question.
Yeah.
So it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, my God. Well, take that off. No, what happened? It was Lyle Zay Doe played a school teacher who moonlighted as a wrestler, right? And they made a deal with Crockett to provide talent. And I guess it was on TBS. I guess I don't know. But anyway, you know, some of the guys they would pick, and they never picked them. We didn't want to do it because they shot somewhere in fucking Canada. So on our day off, if we had a day off, either that or we'd be booked off of a show, and we'd be sent all the way to fucking Canada to be in a sitcom, which at the time, we thought, well, this makes wrestling look phony, obviously. We don't want to be a part of that. I've always hated the idea of having television shows about wrestlers that show behind the scenes, because invariably they make the fucking business look phony. It was a lot more bigger deal there than it is now. Now here we are talking about it. But also the pay was like $500, and we were making more than that wrestling shows 90 miles from the fucking house, rather than going to Canada to expose the business in a fucking situation comedy that wasn't very fucking good. But they had Stan on it one time, and I don't even remember why, but we weren't asked, and we weren't really missing it.
No problem. Courtney Marshall, do you think that Crockett was going out of business in 1988 when Arn and Tully left? Why did they leave in the first place?
Oh, God, this would be a long one. We thought Crockett was going out of business more in March of '88 than we did in September of '88 when they left. Wrestling's a cycle, and houses were down the latter part of '87 and the first 3 or 4 or 5 months of '88. Business was rotten, and I detail in my book, Jim Cornette Midnight Express 25th.
Available at?
Book, available at jimcornette.com. I tell what we were making, the matches, what they were drawing. But the point is, business was down, and we had no opponents. That's why we brought the Fantastics in. We begged Dusty, and he said, okay, we'll do it, to bring in Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, because we had gone several months with no opponents. So anyway, then we had great matches in the ring, then we still had to worry about drawing money, and Dusty put a hell of an '88 Great American Bash together, and we went all across the country. The '88 Bashes were the most extensive tour they ever did, and we did big business that summer, and then shot the Angle with Tully and Arn for the World Tag Team titles. So the double main event going around everywhere was Flair versus Luger. I'm going to rematch off the '88 Bash in Baltimore, and Tully and Arn versus the Midnight Express, match that never happened for the tag title. We actually did better houses in some of the cities than the Great American Bash did. We did 115 grand, I'm going to say, in Richmond, Virginia for the Bash, and came in September, did 140. Sold the place out. The houses had come up so much in these new matches that David and Jackie Crockett were trying to talk Jimmy out of selling to begin with. But it had gone too far, and it was already ready to go. And the reason why Tully and Arn left is because as they were doing due diligence to buy the company, TBS conducted supposedly confidential interviews where, well, what do you think ought to be done? And Tully, of course, being the fucking non-political motherfucker he was at the time, just knocked Dusty 15 ways from Sunday. And of course, TBS people immediately told Dusty. Dusty banned Tully off the fucking plane. Arn got hot. You know, Crockett's private plane, and the Jabroni jet and the Falcon jet was the real nice one. That's where the 9 top guys Jimmy Crockett flew on, right? Then the Jabroni jet, the Gulfstream with the propellers. That's where that was more fun because you had room to stand up. Anyway, Tully and Arn came in that night in Philadelphia and gave their notice that we're dropping the belts to the Midnight Express. That's why that match got such a fucking response because the people saw us win the belts. And if you watch the tape back, which also the video is available at JimCornette.com, I got sources.
How'd you do
well,
that?
I had friends in the stands with camcorders. What can I say?
Good man.
A lot of the 86 title matches are there also. Go to JimCornette.com, you'll find out all about it. But anyway, the people popped, but then they thought, okay, it'll be a reverse decision. And when we actually left the ring with the belts, it started getting bigger. And that's what got us over in Philadelphia as baby faces, because they just, wow, it was something they weren't supposed to see.
Brad Dykins asks, do you ever have nightmares about the dynamic dudes?
Oh, gee, you know, Shane wasn't so bad, but that fucking left foot Laurinaitis, let me tell you something. No, actually, the dudes didn't give me nightmares. We managed to forget the matches, but then somehow Laurinaitis came back in a reincarnation to inflict misery on the entire world of wrestling, and actually my bigger nightmares are about the shit that he did to Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville on the way to completely destroying and demolishing the WWE developmental program anywhere and completely destroying their chances of finding, training, and fostering future talent. All goes on John Laurinaitis' back because he's a big lying sack of shit. Hi, John. Fuck you.
Adam Krasnoff of New Orleans, Louisiana asks, as despised as Jim Herd was, do you know of any good ribs that were pulled on?
Well, actually, no. You don't rib people unless you like them or unless it's some fucking annoying fuck that you really don't like and you can get away with it. He didn't fit either category because nobody liked him, but at the same point, he had a position of power. But when, I can't remember what the milestone was, but I was living in Knoxville because I remember making the phone call to 1-800-Flowers or whatever from my office downstairs. So it was in 92, right before he left. He was fixed to leave because he left in 92, so he was fixed to quit. And they reached some milestone where some house was so rotten, or some pay-per-view was nobody watched, or some rating was so minuscule that I just called up 1-800-Flowers and sent him a bouquet at the CNN Center in Atlanta, a bouquet of dead black roses with a card that said, "Our deepest sympathies on the death of your wrestling promotion, Jim Cornette and Stan Lane." Well, then Jim Ross, later on I talked to him, and he said what happened was they evidently delivered the flowers, and the card just said, "Jim, our deepest sympathies." They delivered the flowers to fucking Herd, right? He came in, got hot, picked them up, carried them down the fucking hallway, and put them on Jim Ross's desk. Jim Ross comes in, sees him, reads the card. No, I would send him something like that. So then he figures out what happened. He picked them up and carried them back down to fucking Herd's, put them on Herd's desk again. No, there were no good ribs with Herd. He wasn't, he had no sense of humor. He had no sense. Nobody liked him. Nobody cared. They just, the way I wanted to give my resignation, because we knew we were going to quit WCW. We talked about, I fantasized about it in the car. I'd almost get a hard on. For the last year I was with WCW, I was booking Smoky Mountain Wrestling in my head. We talked about it. I talked with Bobby and Stan back and forth. And the original plan was to take the Midnight with me, but we thought we'd let the contract expire. We didn't know Stan and I were going to quit, and that whole story's detailed. But anyway, I want to give my notice this way. I said to Jim Herd, I want to fucking walk in with a starter pistol, a blank gun, and kick his fucking door open and fire 5 shots at him. That's why I'm going to quit. And Bobby brought me back out of it because he said, "Corny, as many people as this guy has fucked around, he's probably got a real loaded one in his fucking top desk drawer." And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." But then for a brief moment, I thought maybe I'll just take a loaded one first because I wanted to, but I'd rather put my thumbs just in his eye sockets and just do it that way. I don't.
Well, you had a bulletproof vest from Louisiana. Slick Chris, Fall River, thoughts of Paul E. in WCW?
We had a ball. I still liked Heyman then. No. The guys even thought we hated each other. That didn't come till later. It was great to work with because everybody said, number one, you couldn't be a babyface manager. Well, so when people say never to me, I like to do that shit. So I can say, well, no, I did it. And I told Pauline one time, I said, "You're the only human being in the world could have turned me babyface. You could turn Genghis Khan fucking babyface. Nobody can like you." And at least I'd been there longer. So here comes this New York motherfucker, and I mean, I know I'm in a room full of Yankees, but people in Atlanta hate people from New York, and probably vice versa. So here was this obnoxious, Yankee against the fuck. I may be a prick, but I was their prick. I'd been around a while. And so, the whole time we were in WCW together, it was great. Okay. Especially the infamous tuxedo match where Paulie wore those fucking baby blue with white little shorts and everything. But the only problem was when we had that match, the night before we were in Philly. And I jumped off the ring to avoid Terry Gordy throwing a table into the ring, and I fucking twisted my bad knee at the time, which this was the bad one. Now this is the bad one. So it's swollen up, and I'm thinking, oh fuck, we're limited enough as it is. I'm not a great wrestler or a great athlete, but I'm the only person in the world who can blow Paul Lee up because he's worse off than I am. And we got to be on pay-per-view, and now I've got a bad leg. So I said, hit with the phone, throw the powder in my face, and when I'm blind, work on my bad leg with the phone so that I can limp for the rest of the match, and then we'll work it in the match. If you go back and watch the tape, it's the 1990 Baltimore Great American Bash pay-per-view. You will see we've been sitting like this, right, across from each other for the previous hour talking about what we're going to do. And I'm saying, work on the blah, blah, blah. He immediately goes to work on the wrong knee. And you see me trying to pull him over in my other knee, and I'm pulling him away. I'm laying this leg out, and he's going back there, and I'm like, damn it. Finally, he just starts beating the fuck out of both of my fucking legs. It didn't come off anywhere nearly as bad as it should have, considering who was in it. I'll say that.
Greg Pike, biggest NWA/WCW payday.
Starrcade '86 was 10 grand. Starrcade '87 was 10 grand. Those were the biggest ones. I knew we were in trouble when WCW too. We were used to 5 grand for Starrcade '85. When basically the big show of the year, that was our payoff. Like I said, '87 didn't deserve it. I think they just were ashamed that they set us up on that scaffold for nothing. But when WCW took over and all of a sudden the pay-per-views got full coverage, all the cable systems, instead of just these closed circuit Starrcades, fuck, the biggest fucking check we got for a WCW pay-per-view was $3,000. We knew then we were in trouble. Of course, we were on guaranteed money and they were making none. But see, I looked at it like it wasn't our fucking fault the company ain't making any money, because it's not the fault of the wrestlers who were drawing sellouts in Richmond or wherever 2 months before they bought the company. It was the fault of the people running it, because in the book it is detailed. I won't even mention the book or where to get it. We went from doing record houses in some places in September of 1988. They bought the company in October of 1988. By February of 1989, Greensboro was down to fucking $12,000 gates. It just fell apart. Part of it was Tully and Arn. That took the emotion, took kind of the foundation. To break up the Horsemen took the foundation out of the NWA. But they hired people that had no fucking clue. They booked buildings on the wrong nights. They made the television show look like a fucking game show. The ding dongs, all the other things. It was an uphill battle for me.
Smoky Mountain, Tojo Boy, courtesy of Wrestling Classics. I
bet that's David.
Years.
I know David.
He's never answered this question for me. Back in '92, when Smoky Mountain was on Chattanooga TV, they never ran in Chattanooga, even though they did promos saying they were going to run a card there. I think Chattanooga would have given them another good, bigger city to hold semi-regular cards in Tennessee. Hey, Jim Williamson wants to know, why the hell didn't Smoky come to Chattanooga?
We tried, and actually I didn't even know I'd never answered this question for David. We wanted to clear television, and there was boy, this is going to be that long. Between 1987 and '88, when the territory started going out of business, and 1992, when we were doing this, those 4 years saw the influx of the infomercial, and also at the same time television was deregulated in large part by the FCC, because there used to be a limit on how much commercial time you can have on television and all this other thing, and it just bah. So whereas wrestling programs were great ratings getters, and that's what stations wanted in the 70s and 80s, by the early 90s the television stations didn't care about the ratings, because they had people, here's a tape and here's a check, just run it for a fucking hour. They didn't even need a sales force except to sell their 6 o'clock news fucking commercials. So that made it hard to clear television stations without paying for them, which Vince had set the precedent. We'll pay you, here's our tape. We went into the television station, the Fox station in Chattanooga, and said, if you will give us a time slot, we will run shows in Chattanooga, and we will buy schedules of advertising, and we will figure there's a variety of ways you can do it. If the TV station wants to be a partner, you're great. If not, and you're fucked. And the station said, well, the only time we have right now is 1 a.m. Friday night, Saturday morning after the whatever the fuck Fox had on until 1 a.m. in the morning. But if we get good feedback, we'll find you a better time slot. So we're on there cutting promos. Hey, we're coming to Chattanooga. We're coming to Chattanooga. If you write in, tell the TV station you love us. No, they never came through. Then all of a sudden they would air us at 1 o'clock in the morning, but they wouldn't talk about, even for a little bit of money, putting something on in the daytime. And we're not going to try to run a city the size of Chattanooga with a TV show us on at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Fox station. And it just didn't work out.
Gotcha. Mike Campbell, 411mania.com. During the early stages of Smoky Mountain heavyweight title tournament, there was a spot in the tournament for Scott Anthony. Was this supposed to be the same Scott Anthony who was working in Global and eventually became Raven? If so, do you recall why he never wound up coming into Smoky Mountain?
Yes, it was supposed to be, and no, I don't. I don't remember. You know what?
You're speechless.
Was it? You know what? I think it was. God damn! I remember him calling me and saying I can't do something. Was it he was starting with ECW and going to do the Raven thing? What was the timing on that? Anybody help me?
95.
Okay, then it wasn't that. Where did he go in 92?
He's still in WCW.
That may have been it. It may have been that because either I thought he was going to be available, or he did, or whatever.
When was he in New York?
He was
Flamingo.
Scotty
that was
Flamingo.
around about that time.
Was after that. He
That was
WCW.
before he
I know that he was Scotty Flamingo.
Well, somewhere or another, and I mean, I'm not, fucking knocking Scotty. It's not like I was going to put the belt on him. And at the same, I wasn't. And at the same time, he had something else going on that would have been more advantageous for him. And so there was no heat and
Scheduling conflict. Mookie Gahan, courtesy of Figure 4 Online, how angry was at Jericho for breaking his arm.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, I get a videotape in the mail, and normally I get these tapes, and it's a bad camcorder footage of a guy that has no tights and he weighs 140 pounds and he can't fucking wrestle, and he's with another guy the same way. And I was in Smoky Mountain. I was trying to find some new guys, but at the same time, I just got disgusted with watching these tapes. So I popped one in. The only reason I popped it in was because it came from Canada, and he bothered to send it with a legible fucking cover letter. And so I pop it in, a guy I've never heard of, and I'm looking. I was like, Jesus Christ! His name was Lance Storm, and he was leaping to the top rope in one leap. But it wasn't just acrobatics for the sake of it. He had the size, he had the body. He had the look, he was young, he was wrestling, he was working, his shit looked good and acrobatic. And he's working with this blonde kid. Like, fuck, the blonde kid's as good as he is, Chris Jericho. And so I call up Lance Storm. I said, I would like you to come down here. By the way, can you get a hold of the fucking guy you're working with? Yeah, we're a tag team. Sometimes. I said, well, great. I can't remember what name they used. And then the problem was, Lance was a Canadian citizen. Jericho had dual citizenship. So he could come, but Lance, we had to get paperwork done. I had to hire an immigration lawyer and all this stuff. But I had him come down, and it was great because when they came down for a Knoxville show, just to see the show and to get familiar with the area, and that happened to be, I think, our Sunday Bloody Sunday show where we did a $30-something house, and Terry Funk was in, and there was like 5,000 people there, and they're going, oh shit, we've made it, right? So I made a deal with them, and they didn't understand the concept of gimmicks, selling gimmicks, merchandise, because the Rock and Roll Express may have been making $500 a week wrestling, but they were making $1,000 a week on fucking selling pictures of merchandise. So I'm looking at these two guys, they gotta be pussy magnets, right? The way they look, and they're young, and I said, you can make money on merch. Well, if we're gonna move from Canada, we want to. So I ended up getting and Jericho says this in his book, but he acts like that they raped me and took advantage of me, and really it wasn't that bad. I got their gimmick money and gave them like a $750 a week guarantee or whatever, which wasn't that far out of the way, but I'm thinking these guys are going to sell fucking pictures out the ass. Well, and Lance, I love you. I love you. But Lance was bringing his wife to the matches to sell his gimmicks. And then the rats weren't, the only baby faces I've ever seen, the heels were getting more pussy than the baby faces. Because Jericho was picky, as he says in his book. My God, you know, I guess he was waiting for Pamela Anderson to walk through. I mean, all the other guys was 8 to 80, blind, cripple, or crazy. If they can't walk, we'll drag them. But Jericho was picky, and Lance had his wife with him. So they weren't, the girls were not, they were not getting service, so they weren't buying the stuff. So I was taking a little bit of a bath, but if I can get these guys over, because I worked them with Well Done, Rex King and Steve Dahl, and you know, they got over there, and then I had the Heavenly Bodies come back for a week for the big shows in August. From the WWF to put the Thrill Seekers over, Storm and Jericho, and we're said the big match going to be Knoxville Civic Coliseum, the Night of the Legends, Heavenly Bodies and Thrill Seekers, this big angle we've built up, and we're going to be sold out, which we were. So that night, and I had told Jericho, I saw him take this fucking bump at a spot show in like Wartburg, Tennessee. Guy, he shoots a guy off in the corner and he comes charging and the guy moves and he goes up over the turnbuckles and hits his head on the ring post and takes a bump straight to the floor and looked like he killed himself. I immediately said, never take that bump again. Never do that again until I tell you to. Because it's going to be on a big show in Knoxville, it's going to be sold out. When you hit the post, you're going to get juiced, the heels are going to beat the piss out of you, and that's going to be the turning point of the match, and then you're going to make a giant comeback and it'll get you over. So never do that again in front of 300 people in fucking high school gym. Because you could kill yourself. So I've got that bump scheduled for that match, right? We're shooting interviews. At 4 o'clock that day, Jericho says, you don't need me for interviews. Do you mind if I go out and work out in the ring? I said, just don't hurt yourself. And off he goes. So we do the interviews. About an hour and a half later, Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, comes run up to me. It's okay, Jericho's gone to the hospital, but he said he'll be back. I'm like, don't fuck with me, Brian. No. We think he's broken his arm. Who broke his fucking arm? He did. What was he doing? Practicing a shooting star press. He broke his own arm. The building is sold out. He's in the co-main event that night with the Heavenly Bodies. He didn't need to do a shooting star press. The tickets were already sold. All he needed to do was get in the ring, have the match, and win. And now he's also, it's his right arm since his juice getting armed. So that whole fucking spot's out the window. And then he ended up getting juiced with his fucking left hand, and either because it was left-handed or he wanted to make up for it, then he looked like he'd been run through a razor blade factory. He almost bled to death. He did. I've got to give him credit. He goes to the hospital. He gets the, not artificial, but those temporary casts put on. They said, oh, you need surgery. Oh, I got to go wrestle. What? And he comes back, gets the juice, they win the fucking match, and then the next day he said, fuck it. And they had to put a pin in his arm and all that shit, and he's done. So now I got Lance Storm, one thrill seeker. He can only seek half the amount of thrills. And then I've got no tag team, and then, Jericho was out for months, and then I was afraid Lance was going to be mad at me. I said, I can't keep paying you this single money because, blah, blah, blah. So we agreed Lance would go back home, and eventually they made it in wrestling, and I'm proud for him. But I may have been slightly mad at Chris that night.
I bet you were. An expletive or two may have fallen out of your holy mouth. Slick Chris, Fall River, once again, thoughts of Vince using Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch as Skip and Sonny, and then having Tom Pritchard to sit.
A massive waste of talent, but I was resigned to it at that point because I saw, people being wasted. He had this idea that Chris somehow looked like the fucking Tony Little, those infomercials, the exercise guy, and Sonny looked like a fucking cheerleader, and the body Donnas, and here's this fucking young kid that is a main event talent, and this fucking cunt, and I say that with all the fucking love in the world for Tammy. She's a fucking bitch. She's a cunt. You can hate her. I've loved her since the moment I saw her because she, of all women that have ever been in this business, has the ability to be a heel. And you got these two that are young and already smart to the business, and the jumping jacks. Well, that was fucking stupid. And then Tom Pritchard, obviously after the bodies, he needed a place to go, and they fucking shave his head and make him do that, and it was just stupid, and it fucking sucked. And here's Tom's a great worker, and Tom would never say fuck the WWF, so I'll say it for her. Fuck you, WWF, on behalf of what you did to Tom Pritchard.
Eric,
on a number of occasions.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee, and Jimmy Clow of Kentucky also asked, what was the real reason you closed Smoky Mountain down in late '95? Was it money, problems, burnout, combination of both? Different reason.
Well, no, if I'd had enough money, I'd still be there. 1995 was the year that Vince McMahon lost $6 million. It was the worst year of the 90s for the professional wrestling business. Nobody was drawing. That was when WCW Bischoff had just taken over. And remember, they did their first Nitro at the fucking Mall of America, for fuck's sake, like goddamn Tiffany or whoever she was. They were not drawing at all. Vince was losing money. We had gotten to the point where we were... I mean, seriously, a couple of grand a week would have been the difference between staying in business and not. But we'd gotten almost that close and we started dropping again. And I'd lost the bodies. And the rock and roll, who were a boon at the start, now they'd been back together for 3 years. So you couldn't get any other new talent. Basically, we went into Thanksgiving weekend without going into the whole song and dance. We couldn't get the international distribution. You know, Howard Brody, as a matter of fact, 6 months after we closed down, Howard Brody made me $75,000 for international television sales. Yeah, thank you, Howard, but I wish you'd been quicker. No. We went into Thanksgiving weekend, and I said, if we can do what we did last year, no better, no worse, then we can pay off our current fucking bills and et cetera, and then I'll go to Christmas and see what the fuck. And we did like $10,000 or $12,000 less for that Thanksgiving week. That's when Ricky Morton had a problem with his girlfriend having a fight with Tracy Smothers' girlfriend. They were supposed to work a program, just yada yada yada. I was getting burnt. I could have still kept doing it if the money was there, but basically Rick Rubin, who had backed us and been great through the whole thing, after 4 years, we were breaking even some, we were making a little money on some, losing a little money on some. But he thought we should have been self-sufficient, but we didn't realize in 1992 that we thought in 1992 the wrestling business is as bad as it's ever going to get. Holy shit, were we wrong? It got steadily worse. Smoky Mountain house shows were outdrawing some WCW house shows, if that tells you anything. It just, people hated wrestling then. So at any rate, we did less, and I said, fuck it, I'm not going to get in a situation that other people got in later with ECW or whatever, where I owe people money I can't pay back. All the boys got all their money, paid the production company, got the fucking tapes, had a lot of my money in it as well. I'm not going to say a television station or two that had given it to us up the ass over a period of time might have got their last check or whatever, but the boys got paid and the production company that had worked with us got paid. And I just thought this is the time. And I'd gone to Vince, and because I had been working up there. I said, Vince, we're probably closing up by the end of the year, and not going to have a place to get any talent from. And I didn't come out and say, will you help us? But that was I was leading it in that direction. And all he said was, well, if you need a job, pal, just call me, you got one. All right, thanks a lot. He didn't realize for about the next 2 or 3 years, oh fuck, now I got no place to get talent. That's why he started going to Memphis with Lawler, and then when I came up with the developmental program for OVW, but that was 5 years later or 4 years later, and he didn't realize how bad it was going to get yet with not being able to get any talent. So, blah, blah, blah.
Ponyplayer19, courtesy WrestlingClasses.com. I always thought that Smoky Mountain might have worked at least a little better or for a little longer if you had a better lead baby face. Brian Lee, Tracy Smothers didn't cut it. Bob Armstrong didn't either. The high-quality tag team matches should have been the added attraction, not the main attraction. What they always lacked was a real star with real charisma that fit the old kayfabe territory theme of the promotion. So my question would be, who, in retrospect, do you think you could have gotten to fill that role? Who was out there that you could have afforded, that could have anchored the promotion and given you a chance? I asked this because I thought about it myself and can't think of anyone. I'm sure he's pondered it a lot more. Well, what about you, Ponyplay? Where were you at the time?
Well, dumb shit. If you've thought about it and I've thought about it and we neither one came up with anybody, chances are that means there wasn't anybody. No, Brian Lee didn't cut it. And my original choice was Brad Armstrong. Because I thought Brad Armstrong looked like an athlete, could talk, could work, was a tremendous worker, was the smoothest worker of all the Armstrongs. And had never gotten a chance. But he wasn't available when we started in '92, and he was the one that I had thought when I'd book Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the backseat with the Midnight Express on those WCW trips, he was going to win the tournament. Couldn't get him. In the tournament was Brian Lee, Dirty White Boy was a heel then, Paul Orndorff, Ronnie Garvin, Dixie Dynamite was Scott Armstrong. There was 8 guys in the tournament. It was a one-night tournament. Anyway, Brad was going to win, couldn't get him. Brian Lee had been wrestling in Memphis, big tall kid, cut an okay promo, okay work. Brian's problem was he just couldn't. He was one of the guys, I've said it about other people, he had all the tools, couldn't read the manual. Just something about it never clicked with Brian. I like Brian and have any problems with him. But he was the top babyface until then we were able to switch Tony Anthony, the Dirty White Boy, because he at least had a history in that territory. Then Tracy Smothers, I thought, did the best job overall because Tracy worked his ass off, had great matches, could talk, was legitimate for that territory, for that area of the country. People could identify with him, but at the same time, no, Tracy Smothers was not Jerry Lawler in Memphis, or was not Dusty Rhodes in Atlanta or Tampa or whatever. I tried Terry Taylor one time because they let Terry Taylor go from WCW, but he was still involved with the power plant because Eric Bischoff had said, oh, but you can still... I said, okay, if you've got anything to do with him, Terry, I love you. I think you should always have had a spot as the top babyface, but if you've got anything to do with Eric Bischoff and he sees that you're in any way successful for us, then he's going to fucking hire you back. So that didn't work. There was no top babyface to be had, and that was and Bob Armstrong, I just want to clarify this, Bob Armstrong was never the top babyface. Bob Armstrong, you always need a legend. You always need somebody that the people associate and remember from their childhood that can still get in and do it every once in a while. And with Bob, people forget we made him the commissioner. He wore a suit and tie, well, not a suit, but a tie, and a commissioner's baseball cap. Yeah. And because he could cut a hell of a promo, and you believed what Bob Armstrong said, and at 70 years old, which he is right now, he's still got bigger arms than anybody in this room, including me. Incredible shape. The fucking deal was Bob was a commissioner for a year, and then finally, because of the evil deeds of that no good stinking manager and his fucking men, especially what we'd done to his family, he was forced back into fucking wrestling, and he did it sparingly. And that drew, actually, the first biggest house, point is, I brought the Steiner brothers in to face Heavenly Bodies, and Knoxville did $8,000. I brought Big Boss Man Kevin Sullivan, a bunch of people, and we would get a little better. Arn Anderson, the Rock and Roll Express, etc. The biggest house to that point in time we ever did was Jim Cornette versus Bob Armstrong in the main event in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a lumberjack match with all the guys around the ring holding tennis rackets. And Bob basically said, Cornette, you put me in the hospital after the volunteer slam in May. You cracked my sternum with that racket, which I did. And he made sure to let me know about it. You handcuffed me to that cage. You cracked my sternum with the racket. You beat me up and you had me carried out in an ambulance to the hospital. Well, I guarantee you in that lumberjack match, I'm going to have you carted out to the same hospital that you sent me to, or I will refund the money of every man, woman, and child that buys a ticket to see that match. 3,500 people, almost $20,000. We doubled our previous best house in Knoxville. That's what got Knoxville started with the series of the August big shows that later on, next 2 years, sold out. It's not about having the greatest match. It's not about the greatest talent. It's about having something that people can believe in, that they want to see, and then presenting it in such a way that they know when they pay their money, they're going to be happy. And that's what we did. So Bob Armstrong, per match, per capita, drew more money and sold more tickets than anybody had ever wrestled in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee, do you happen to know or have an estimate on the number of original TV program content hours that you yourself have produced with your own companies? I don't know how the hell you would do this, but go ahead, take a stab at it.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling produced 200 shows, 198 of them aired. We also did some big events for videotape, but that doesn't count. With Ohio Valley Wrestling, it was right at 300 hours of weekly television, because I started in July '99 and stopped in July of 2005. So what's 6 times 52? Anybody? 312 or whatever the case. Yeah. Plus we did 4 2-hour primetime specials on the WB station. So 500 and
a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Sebastian, why did you sell Smoky Mountain Wrestling video library to WWE?
For 6 figures. That's why. To get my money back that I'd put into it. You know, it wasn't. I didn't consider if I owned the classic Florida library, and I know Mike Graham had issues with this, or if I owned the Mid-South library, and that's still up in the air, or if I owned a library of classic wrestling that I knew that they would butcher and it would never be seen and they would fucking hide it and just show it and rewrite history, I don't know that I would have done it, but I didn't consider SMW, you know, the hardcore fans' dream treasure trove. It was, you know, it was a good show, but at the same time, I had 6 figures in it. I want to get 6 figures back out of it. And the same thing with Ohio Valley Wrestling. I know, you know, we sold it, and they didn't want to pay us, by the way. The fucking pricks apparently thought that they owned everything. Danny Davis had Ohio Valley Wrestling already had a television show. And they thought from the time that they first sent down 6 trainees, 3 of whom could wrestle in front of people and 3 of whom had never even graduated class yet and couldn't even wrestle in front of people, they just assumed that they owned our television program because they're fucking obnoxious pricks. And by the way, if you ever think about doing business with the WWE and you're in the wrestling business, they will fuck you because they think that they're better than you are. So we finally had to argue with them because they would stop us from selling our show. No, you can't sell the show overseas for money because we own it. Show me where you own it. We had the fucking, well, it's our talent. Well, what about the non-contract referees, the non-contract wrestlers, the non-contract announcers, and the fact that we pay to produce and pay to air the fucking program? Fuck you. So they bought it from us. And you'll never see that either because, you know.
That leads to the next question. Yeah. Video from Jimmy James.
Good. They own it, so why does the WWE hardly use any of the SMW footage? Is it to get back at you? Do they just not see the value in it or what? I don't think they're getting back. I don't think they see value in it because it was great, you know, heated wrestling matches with Tracy Smothers, the Dirty White Boy, and the Heavenly Bodies, and the Rock and Roll Express. They use clips of people like Al Snow or Kane. Maybe they use Kane, I don't even know, because he was Unabomb, but a few of the people, and I think Jim Ross also did a lot to get them. They were buying libraries at that point, and JR said, hey, a lot of the guys started here. And I think, you know, so he was probably helpful in that, but I don't think it's anything. They would rather show the best of Chief J Strongbow from 1973. All those classic fucking matches. If I said, fuck you, WWE, in the past 15 seconds, because I'd like to again, it just feels so good running off my tongue. Fuck you, WWE.
Mr. James E. Cornette, James here from OffTheMarkShow.com. Take us back to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It was a great promotion, and the blood that guts the old school. It was kind of like the ECW of the South.
Wow.
Why did it fold? I mean, it was immensely popular, and WWE owns the footage. They advertise it for it on 24/7 or Classics On Demand, whatever the fuck they call it now. Why don't they use that footage? Is there, you know, was there an argument with you when you left, or do they just not see the value in it?
We just answered this.
Yeah, I was waiting for the video to come up, and you read ahead.
Oh.
Most guys I have on the show can't read,
shit,
so I have the advantage
sorry.
of.
Well, you know.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee. Over the last couple of years, I've been able to get all the old Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV shows on tape, as well as a lot of the house shows. Are there any plans for these shows to be remastered and made to the public on DVD?
Well, no, because I sold them to the WWF and I don't want them to sue me. But at the same time, I encourage and admire all tape traders. Keep this stuff alive. That's why I have a huge collection of wrestling on video, and that's why I think that everybody, and that's the tape traders before the internet and before commercial releases. I would tape the show in Louisville and I'd send it to the guy in Atlanta who taped the Georgia show, or the guy in Detroit who taped the, you know, whatever, from 79 through the early mid-80s there. That's the way that all this stuff was kept alive. That's why so much wrestling is available from 79 on, but so little because that was the VCR, you know. And I know it's hard for people now, young people, to understand. When we, who had 4 television stations in our town, suddenly had a box that we could actually pick up and carry that would videotape television so that we could watch it later, and it only cost $1,000. My God, that was revolutionary. And then you had a wireless pause control, or a wired pause control, where you stuck the fucking thing in, and you could go pause, unpause. Fucking brilliant.
All right, Stump Cornette, you sent in your questions. We grabbed a handful of them that we thought were worthy, and if you stump them, you get the DVD for free. All right, firstly from Mike Campbell, 411 Mania. We tried to use the fair questions. There was some nonsense, but let's see. Okay, the question is, who was the first person to win all 3 titles in ECW?
I don't have a first fucking clue. What would I know that?
Well, you're a wrestling historian, aren't you?
Yeah, but that's not wrestling history. That's modern shit.
Bruce Mitchell would know.
It's only history if you're fucking 12 years old.
Bruce Mitchell would know.
Bruce Mitchell knows a lot of things. Some of them I don't want to know.
Okay,
I couldn't name you 3 ECW champions. Taz, Raven. Am I getting anywhere?
No.
I ain't hitting any. Is this cash cab?
The answer is Johnny Hotbody.
Wow.
It's true.
Okay.
All right, a question from Kevin Barrett. Besides being the first main event of the first wrestling pay-per-view, the match between Harley Race and Ric Flair had another first to it. What was it?
Wait a minute. Match between Harley Race and Ric Flair was not on the first wrestling pay-per-view.
Well, Starrcade 83, right?
That was not on pay-per-view. Starrcade 83
Well, it
was
was,
on
it
the
was a
circuit. The
closed
first
circuit,
wrestling
right.
pay-per-view was that Wrestling Classic deal that Vince did in 85 as a trial.
Yeah, right. In that, yeah. Okay,
So
but
basically, I've just blown your fucking
it's
question.
It's
All right.
invalidated. The question's been invalidated by the main.
Okay, but what's the question again now?
Okay, well, the Harley Race and Ric Flair match, there was a significant first in wrestling history, other than...
For Starrcade 83.
Yeah.
Flair for the gold. That was the significant first.
A hint for you, you would have seen it happen 3 other times.
Well, then how could it be a fucking first?
That was the first, but it has happened 3 times since.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
And the NWA World Title changed hands in a steel cage.
Oh, well, for fuck's sake.
Don't get all Russo on me. It's not his fault. He got you. All right.
Well, that question's invalidated anyway.
Jorge. When Tatanka debuted, he went on to his Goldberg...
Can somebody give me a question from the 70s that I'd know the answer to? All right, no, go ahead with Tatanka.
When Tatanka debuted, he went on his Goldberg-esque winning streak. Who handed him his first loss?
When did Tatanka, what year anybody did Tatanka debut?
93?
Okay, I'm in fucking Knoxville working 20 hours a fucking day booking wrestling. I didn't have time to watch the fucking WWF. I didn't even watch the shows I appeared on.
Ludwig Borga.
Oh, geez, there you go.
Jay Zaretsky from Ontario,
Who wouldn't have
Canada.
known that?
You're breaking me. I had to give away 3 discs already. Jay Zaretsky, Ontario, Canada. Which wrestler tried to work an angle tastelessly recreating the Bruiser Brody murder, but was given so much
Onita.
negative... Okay, very good.
Jesus.
Very good. Jorge asked another one.
Jorge again.
Well, you got him the first time. Let's see. Only 2 masked wrestlers have ever held the AWA heavyweight title. Who are they?
Was he Dr. X
Yes,
at that
sir.
time? And the Destroyer. No, Destroyer was WWE. Wait a minute, masked wrestlers holding the title. Is that the masked Mr. M?
Yes,
Bill Miller?
sir.
Yes,
Both of
okay.
them.
See, and the older stuff, I started to say antique, but older stuff, you know, I can...
Okay, and prior to Rocky Maivia, what 2 American non-indie wrestlers used The Rock as a prefix to their name?
Well, Ole Anderson's
Yes,
nickname
sir,
was
that's one.
The Rock, although he actually didn't use that professionally. But you're also talking about Rock Riddle, or just a prefix instead of a...
Yeah, not part of the name.
So I like Rock Riddle. I just wanted to mention his name. Don Morocco.
Correct.
Yeah.
You got them both.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to do the
And
shit?
Rock Riddle extra credit for not knowing fucking Tatanka's fucking business. She asked me goddamn Cowboy Lang's social security number.
Set up the board
Why
for
are
me
you
real quick.
rushing through me?
Wait, he's just leaving.
I'm nervous. He's going to get divorced. I got to get him to his dinner.
During the segment.
ECW. Mike Giuliano, how did the heat between you and Paul Heyman begin, and how much of it was a work?
God, we could be here for a while. You know, the thing is, and I can't say that I hate Paul Heyman personally. It's nothing like Vince Russo. I would kiss Paul Heyman on the face before I would fucking be in the same room right now with Vince Russo. But and I mean, Paulie's always had his little tricks. Like, you know, when I quit WCW, he'd call me at my house in Charlotte every month or so, you know, on the pretext of, you know, how are you doing or whatever. But actually, you got them right where you want them. They'll give you anything to come back. Paul, I'm not coming back. I don't like those people that want to work for them. Got them right where you want them. Just keep it up like that. Either he thought everything was always a work, because in his mind it is, or elsewise he was checking to see. One time he even put his arm around me like this, started walking me to the door. If I were you, I wouldn't take this. He wanted to get me out of there. But the thing started with me and Paul with the Gangstas thing, where I'd had the Gangstas for a year, and you know, I came up with the gimmick when I saw them working in Atlanta for Sammy Kent and the little, you know, local promotion there, and I thought, this New Jack can talk, and Mustafa looks great. It would work on both of them. They were still real green, but you know, it was topical, the Rodney King beating. So I thought, let's take this black tag team, supposedly from South Central LA to the fucking hills of Tennessee, and they got to get some heat. They did, unfortunately. Lesson learned as a booker, it was the wrong kind of heat. But in the process, I mean, and plus, they once, one of our local ring announcers once announced them from South Central Louisiana. They didn't even, you know, they weren't even watching the news, right? They didn't, and Mustafa Saeed became Mustaf Said, you know. But anyway, and I've told this story before, but I'll try to make it brief. They've been there for almost a year, and I gave them a 3-month notice. I said, guys, you've wrestled everybody. I ain't got nothing else to do. We're losing spot shows because, to be quite honest, a lot of the local fire departments, it wasn't they wanted to see these heels get the shit kicked out of them. They just didn't want to see these heels. They didn't want to have them in their fucking town. And whether somehow I became a racist because the volunteer fire department in Paintsville didn't want black guys in their fucking gym. I don't know. But anyway, so I tried Memphis, and Randy Hales wouldn't touch him because Randy's, you know, a lot more conservative than I am, and he didn't want to do that. And of course the WWE, no, we ain't gonna, we've heard that New Jack talk, you know, we ain't gonna do that. I said, they're tailor-made for ECW. And I hadn't talked to my old friend Paul in a couple of years. So I called Paul trying to get him a spot in ECW, but at the same time, New Jack had evidently called and either talked to him or Todd Gordon. So the story I'm getting from Paul is, yeah, we'd like to have him. And I said, look, I'm finishing them up on July 15th or whatever it is, and I said, we can shoot something on tape, we can do an angle, or I can say, whatever the fuck you need, I want to get these guys a spot because they worked for me. Well, at the same time, New Jack comes and says, well, Todd Gordon said, he talked to Paulie, and if we didn't start on July 1st or whatever it was, and then we ain't never going to start. I said, well, it's not the story I got from Paul, because I said I needed you guys to finish up these big towns. You've beat everybody, now's your time. Once on the way out, wasn't going to beat them into powder, to put Tracy Smothers, Tony Anthony over, and blah, blah, blah. So I called Paul back. And I said, Paul, I'm getting conflicting shit here. I said, New Jack's saying that if they don't start July the 1st, then they'll never start. And you said I could have them until the 15th, and then they can start up there. They must honor your dates. They must honor your commitments. I won't use them. I will not use them one time if they don't make all the dates that you book them for. I said, well, that's all I need to know, Paul. Right as I'm hanging up, he says, let me know if you fire them. Okay. Huh? Let me know if you fire them. Well, of course I fired them when they stopped showing up. They went and made the fucking date that they've been saying they were going to make for Paul, and didn't make the last 2 weeks of my dates, and Paul lied to me, and then of course I couldn't get him on the phone after that. And basically, you know, I thought, okay, he's fucking with me. And that's also where the story came in that I owed the Gangstas money, because everybody got paid on the like the last day of the weekend, right? So in this case, it was a Monday television taping. On Saturday night in Johnson City, Mustafa had not showed up, but New Jack was there. And New Jack said something about, you know, car trouble or what. I don't know what the story was. But also, several people, including my ex-wife, heard New Jack say, well, this is the last time I'm going to be here because we're going to ECW. So Monday was television, Sunday was day off, so Monday everybody was going to get paid. So somewhere the Gangstas took draws in cash every night anyway, so it wasn't no big amount of money. I owed each of them $100 for Saturday night or whatever. I owed New Jack $100. I owed Mustafa $100 for Friday night, whatever the fuck it was. The point is, I wrote him out of TV on Monday. And then New Jack shows up, still no Mustafa, and I would have figured it'd been the other way around if I was a betting man. I said, New Jack, why are you here? He said, well, I'm booked. I said, well, you ain't booked anymore because you told several people, including my wife, that you weren't going to be here. Oh, I didn't say that. I said, well, look, Jack, just be honest. If she says that you squat down in the parking lot and shit a live chicken, I'm going to believe her rather than believe you. So I wrote you out, but here's your pay for Saturday night. And no, as a matter of fact, I paid him for coming to TV $100. And Mustafa, I didn't give him Mustafa's money. I said, if Mustafa ever wants to fucking come get this fucking $100, he can come. Right? That's the last time I ever saw him until they walked in on me and the deal, you know. But then New Jack started cutting promos on me on ECW television. And I was hot at him because I gave him a chance. I put him in the ring with The Undertaker. I put him in the ring with a lot of top guys. I gave him the biggest payoffs that they'd ever had in the business. More than $100 a night for the big shows. But at the same time, I was hot at Paul E because why is he working this fucking angle? ECW and Smoky Mountain are never going to have anything going on because it wouldn't fucking work. We're not going to do an invasion angle, nor are they coming down here. Two different styles, two different territories. What the fuck? Why? It just, Paul E was getting jollies from letting the guy knock me. So that was the start of, and then I worked with Paul. When they were punishing him, when he was in the WWE in 2005, they sent him down to Louisville to go to OVW because they knew that was punishment for him because he'd rather be in New York. Whereas the punishment for me was the opposite way around. I wanted to be in Louisville instead of New York, so they were fucking with me in that way, but they were fucking with him. So we commiserated on that. But the problem is, Paul is a pathological liar, and I said at the time he'd rather climb a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. And he hated that, but it's true. Candido and Tammy went in a hole financially on his say-so. A lot of guys did. He fucked up a lot of people's lives with not just telling them the truth. There's the famous Bubba Ray Dudley story about the FedEx. Bubba is promoting one of the New York towns because Bubba's from New York for ECW, and he needs like out of posters, tickets, promotional material, or whatever. He calls Paul. Paul, where is this shit? Oh, I got the FedEx tracking number right here. It's 472-654-651. And Bubba says, Paul, that's one too many numbers. I'll just knock the last one off. No, and he stood Brian Hildebrand desperately. Mark Curtis, who I can't say a bad thing for him, and knew him for 20 years. Everybody loved Brian. He wanted to referee for ECW. That's before he got, after Smoky Mountain closed, before he got the WCW spot, because all the guys liked him so much. He actually was promised a date, and his plane ticket never showed up. So he called Paul. Paul said, oh, it'll be at the airport. He drove from Morristown 50 miles to the fucking Knoxville airport. No ticket. Call Paul. Wait, just call me right back. He calls him back in 10 minutes. Answer machine. Never could get him again. Never could get him again. Standing there. You know, he stood Brian up. Just did a lot of shit like that. Just tell the people the truth, Paul. Just once. That's all. We would have never had these issues. But now one of these days, you and me, on pay-per-view, it'd be a big, I might even work with you. I wouldn't work with Russo, but I'll work with Paul. Maybe.
Justin and Erica have a lot to say. We respect the hell out of you. You're one of the greatest minds in wrestling, no question about it. There's something we don't quite understand, though. It's your view on ECW. We've seen several shoot interviews which you generalize the promotions being blood, ladders, tables, fire, little to no substance. Please feel free to correct us if we're wrong. We find that to be an unfair assessment, though, because ECW was so much more than that. Apart from late 80s NWA programming, we're hard-pressed to think of a wrestling program that was as consistently entertaining as hardcore TV was. And the fact of the matter is that ECW was so much more than tables and barbed wire. Shane Douglas, Taz, RVD, Eliminators, Sabu, Raven, Cactus Jack, Tommy Dreamer, Paul E's brilliant booking, all these things combined to make ECW great, to make ECW matter. There were plenty of matches had at the ECW arena that did not involve tables, fire chairs, foreign objects from the crowd, you know. You might want to write it off or call it a cult attraction, which you have done, but it was much more than that. Please help us understand.
Don't move it. Don't move it. I want to refer to it. I never said it was a cult attraction. I said it was a cult following. And Paulie, I mean, you know, everybody in the business says, well, are we going to drink Heyman's Kool-Aid? He was a cult leader because he was a great motivator, but he would motivate the guys that worked for him to do these things to their bodies and to their pocketbooks that nobody else could motivate them to do. But let's go back to the start. There was Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and great wrestlers, and there were great wrestling matches. Yes, I'll admit that. The problem I had was with ECW. I get, you know, everybody said, well, you did street fight matches in Smoky Mountain. Yeah, but here's the thing. You can have a match that becomes a fight and spills out of the ring and people are being thrown into shit or hit with chairs or whatever, and then you can have a stunt show. And it got so far. It was like hot shotting on a weekly basis. How can we top ourselves? How can we top ourselves? They had a scaffold match, but it wasn't enough for the guy to take a bump off a scaffold. He had to take a bump off a scaffold through 3 tables, possibly that were set on fire. I can't remember. They set people on. They set Terry Funk on fucking fire. The barbed wire. I'm seeing Mick Foley. I respect Mick, and you know, he's wrapped up in barbed wire, and people are bleeding out the ass. It's bad for the business. You can't follow it. You as ECW found out. I could have ran Smoky Mountain Wrestling for the 4 years that it was in existence, done the same things, the same television shows, with the same cards, with the same talent, and never charged a single penny for admission, and still would not have owed as much money as ECW did when it went out of business. It's not just a blood, ladders, tables, fire, and little to no substance. There was substance there. I've always said Paulie's a genius at getting the most out of the least. He was a good booker. He had a mind for the business. He could cut a promo. He was a good manager, etc. But he had this little problem with the truth and with restraint, like many people from New York. Russo. I haven't mentioned that name. I guess I will later.
We're so gonna get there.
But the problem is, it becomes a stunt show, and it becomes something. It was contrived. It was choreographed. I'll never forget. I didn't watch a lot of ECW TV. I was up there in Connecticut for a lot of it. I didn't want to watch the WWF TV. But I watched one night, and there's these 2 guys. I can't remember who it was. There's a table set up in the middle of the ring. They get up on the top turnbuckle, and they're both standing there holding on to each other, and they're punching each other while they're on the top turnbuckle, and there's the table, and I don't even think thumbtacks had come in yet, thank God. But they got each other, and all of a sudden you see them look at each other, look down, and go like, okay, here we go. And they both jump off together. It wasn't real. Instead of a fight that was erupting and evolving into a Pier 6 Donnybrook with people getting hit by furniture, instead of hitting people with furniture, they were hitting furniture with people. People knew that there was cooperation involved. They went too far. You can't follow it. After you go through the table on fire, then the table on fire needs to have thumbtacks on it. Then there needs to be AIDS-infested hypodermic needles on the mat below it. And then they got to bring in the pit bulls that haven't been fed in 4 days. Where do you fucking stop? That's what's the problem with the wrestling business now. In a nutshell, 20 years ago, we didn't hurt each other, but people thought we did. Now we hurt each other, but people don't believe it. ECW, in my opinion, was a large part of helping that come about.
TJ from Australia, your thoughts on what WWE did to ECW, or better yet, WWECW?
Oh, wait a minute. I like your... It's been well documented that you're not a big fan of one Paulie Dangerously. The E is for extreme, folks. Or as you may know him on a personal basis, Paul Heyman. While it is known that you two have a, how should I put this, personal hatred for one another, you must at least find something Paulie did as a booker to be at least warranting of your praises. So tell us, King of the Dairy Queen, what would you say is your favorite angle conceived by Mr. Heyman during his reign as booker of the original ECW?
I thought we'd come in a little bit.
You know, but no, I want, because and I wasn't a religious watcher of ECW. I did see some of the TVs, but I don't think that any one particular angle was Paulie's shining moment as much as the fact that Public Enemy, I mean, let's face it, they didn't get over anywhere else because they weren't allowed to do their shit. Paulie let them do their shit. Paulie could find something about anybody. And the Eliminators, not the most polished workers, but great athletes. You could go on and on and on. Paulie got people over that other people couldn't get over, that people couldn't get over in other places. So I think it's what he did with the talent, or bringing in and exposing people to the Eddie Guerreros and the Chris Benoits and etc. before they were on the mainstream promotions. That was, to me, Paul's best contribution to ECW, but I just wish the hardcore stuff is what everybody wanted and what everybody went nuts over, but once again, sooner or later, you hot shot long enough. This is what Russo doesn't understand, and I'll talk more about him later. But Russo does not understand that every period of hot shotting in the business is followed by an equally long, if not longer, period of drought, because you can't follow it. In the old days, when territories were down, business was down, the book, okay, we got a hot shot. We're going to have some blood, we're going to bring the Sheik in, we're going to have an angle, we're going to have a heavy stipulation, we're going to have something. We're going to throw it all at them, get them back, and then get them hooked to what we're doing, and then gear it back before we can't follow it. Now, nobody gears back. Pedal the metal every fucking week, which is why now people are just immune to this constant parade of violence and yelling and screaming. Whereas with TNA, I used to say was, there were women fighting in the women's room, then we cut to the fucking back where somebody's getting thrown into one of the fucking locker room trailers, then we cut to the arena where people are already fighting. It's just endless fucking sound and motion. It means nothing. You can't follow this shit. A little restraint, just a tad. Make it real, don't make it goofy.
Well, what are your thoughts on what WWE's done to it since taking it over?
They didn't take it over, they used the initials. The WWE's version of ECW makes the original ECW look good to me. At least there was some passion and emotion there and some effort, and the guys were trying. WWE, ECW, Vince never understood it. You know, Vince does not see these things. Vince McMahon, and if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet ain't left the ground, never watches any other wrestling. When the Rock and Roll Express came up to do the Survivor Series pay-per-view, he asked me, now which one's Ricky and which one's Robert? Only the hottest babyface team that his competitors had ever had on national television for years and years. He didn't watch it. I sat with him while he watched the first clip of ECW that he had ever seen after they were already working together. Because, and truthfully, I said, do you want to fucking watch this? And it was Bill Alfonso and Beulah, where Alfonso's bleeding like crazy and they're pile driving women. I said, what the fuck? What? Oh, didn't know they did things like that. He never watched WCW. He never watched Nitro. His Stooges and various people. But no, Vince McMahon to this day, I would imagine he hadn't seen as much wrestling non-WWE as we've seen in the last 2 days.
WWE, speaking of which. Greg Pike, thoughts on WWF's Tuesday Night Titans TV show from the mid-'80s?
Well, I've seen clips and I have a bit on tape. We were always working on Tuesday nights in the mid-'80s, but we laughed at it. Everybody, the NWA wrestlers laughed at it. You know, I guess they laughed last, but it was silly, it was stupid, it was cartoony, made wrestling phony, and it was funnier in retrospect than the fucking rotten material that they give guys now to say on television, because at least it was the boys coming up with their own fucking funny shit, and the boys are somewhat funny, but I hated it. Wouldn't even watch it if somebody gave me a free fucking tape, because it was the start of the downfall of our business.
Mark O'Connell, can you explain the meeting you had with McMahon in '86, I believe, when you were with Midnight Express, the moment Vince talked about the doll?
That is an entire chapter in the Midnight Express 25th anniversary scrapbook. That's a long story, but basically we went up there and Ernie Ladd had called us in Charlotte because we were the NWA World Tag Team Champions back when you didn't just, win that, all the time. It meant that you didn't really win the title, but it meant that the promotion thought you were the top team for business. So it was an honor back then to be the World Tag Team Champions. Now you get it, for 3 minutes in segment 6 and lose it somebody in segment 7. Ernie Ladd called and said, well, you ought to come to the WWF. They're making a fortune up here. They're gonna take over the world. Well, Ernie had never steered us wrong, so we got on the phone. I got on the phone with Vince, and he set up a meeting, which we went to Stamford. They flew us up there, and we're expecting to hear, okay, we are your competition's top heel tag team. We're making, this is 1986, we're on track to make a couple $100,000 a piece this year. And, you know, who are you going to use us against? Who are we going to work a program with down here with the Rock and Roll Express and Dusty and Magnum? Who's it going to be up there? What kind of money are we talking about? Are we going to get a run with the belts? When would we try? You know, all the things that you expect to hear those days in wrestling. And you're going to have the opportunity to make more money than you've ever made in your lives. No, we're not. Not if you don't put us on TV and push us and put us over and give us the belt and put us in the fucking main events. Are you going to do that? We were sitting waiting to hear this. We're going to have dolls. See, they didn't have action figures then. It was dolls. The dolls are going to look like you and everything. Well, we're heels. Why would the fuck would we want people to buy our fucking gimmicks? That means they don't hate us. It was a whole different concept. All we can think about now is dolls. He talked about dolls. Dolls through the whole fucking meeting. And there was no money mentioned, no angles, no programs. You might be here however long, you might do this, that, and the other thing. It's dolls, and you got opportunity. Well, we're living in Charlotte. We're making a couple $100,000 a year piece. We're working with fucking the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors and Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA and whoever the fuck else. We're flying around in Crockett's private plane. And why the fuck are we going to go anywhere? So we just didn't go. But the whole story with many more twists and turns is in the book.
Pick it up, JimCornette.com, Eric Smith.
And we didn't regret not going.
When you worked for WWE, did you live in Connecticut? I know the answer to this.
Well, part of the time. Started part-time in 93 when I was still in Tennessee, and then in February of 96, yes, I moved to Connecticut and was there until June 30th, 1999 when I was paroled.
Salvatore M says, growing up in the Northeast, I remember the first time I saw Southern wrestling and was shocked that the top babyface was a pale, obese man who thought he was black. I say that with all due respect to Dusty Rhodes. Granted, he had unreal charisma, but I also had to chalk it up to geography. With that prefaced, as a Southern, what things about wrestling...
As a Southerner, not as a
Southerner.
He says as a Southern.
We read it as they write it. That's part of the fun.
Well,
what things about wrestling above the Mason-Dixon shocked you?
well, like I said, earlier, I wasn't really shocked because I was shocked when we saw that first Madison Square Garden show. I didn't realize Vince, the WWF was always big guys and always kind of the more outlandish personalities, and Southern wrestling was more real, was more gritty, was more passionate, was bloodier and more brawls, and whether it be Eddie Graham loving amateur wrestlers, or whether it be Vern Gagne loving ex-football players, whether it be the Crockett's having the premier workers, in-ring workers, or whether it be Tennessee that was tables and chairs and hardcore before there was hardcore. These towns were smaller, they had smaller populations, they ran weekly a lot of times, definitely monthly, plus spot shows all around the area. The people had to believe. And when I looked at WWF wrestling, which later WWF wrestling, the thing about it is you couldn't really believe it. It was presented as I don't want to use the word hokey, sometimes it was silly. The point was, it wasn't about the action. It wasn't about the heat. I mean, Bill Watts could get some heat on a fucking heel, I can tell you right now, and the people would pay until he got his ass kicked. And then the baby faces, meanwhile, were the people that fucking raised the goddamn flag on Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima because they were vanquishing these evil people. I remember down south, it happened when Sam Bass died, it happened when Bobby Shane died, it happened a couple of times. They would make the announcement if a wrestler was killed in a plane crash or a car wreck, if he was a heel, the fucking place would pop. You would, oh, I'm serious. Not just applause, yes, he's fucking dead. But that's what kept people coming back. The heels were the most evil, degenerate, lying, cheating sacks of shit that ever lived, and the baby faces were the only thing standing between them and fucking certain rule of wrestling, right? And the matches were worked and the angles were done and the promos were given in such a way that you could believe that this shit was going on. And sometimes there was some things a little kabuki-ish, but you know, Jerry Jarrett always used to say, if you tell them the truth that they know to be the truth long enough, once you veer off into the work, they told me the truth about A, B, and C, so that must be true too. Whereas, you know, I mean, and with all respect to Lou Albano, it wasn't, he got a ton of heat in the old days, but by the 80s and 90s with Vince, Junior took over, it was more showbiz and more cartoon. And there was no, and we're like, how the fuck do they expect to make this work? Well, the answer was he wasn't going to run any town regularly. He was going to run every town once a year. You go see the Harlem Globetrotters once a year, but after twice or three times, you're pretty well sure the Washington Generals ain't winning that fucking game. So, but you never knew Southern wrestling. So anyway, that was the difference. It's a cultural shift, and it wasn't the fact that one wrestling style, in my mind, won out over the other. It's the fact that a bunch of fucking blithering morons bought the company and took over the one wrestling style, and they couldn't compete with Vince. The wrestling style was superior. The people running the wrestling, such as TBS, where if it was raining soup, they'd be out in the yard with a fork. So there you have it.
Greg Pike, were you close to Howard Finkel?
Love me some Fink. I love the Fink. Fink is never down. He's always happy. He's always he loves being in that office. He loves everything he does, and I like the Fink.
Anthony Militek, why was Bill Watts' tenure as a booker in WWE so short?
Because he was not allowed to be the booker. Vince was still going to take over. He was there about 6 or 8 weeks, and then he wrote a TV, and Vince saw it as it was shot and decided, well, we're going to put the last match first, the first match last, and Watts went in and said, Vince, there's only room for one Titan in Titan Sports, and you're it. I'm going home to Bixby.
That's actually a quote. He did say
yes.
that. Slick Chris from Fall River, thoughts of Sweet Stan Lane as an announcer at WWF?
Well, Stan, I thought, did a very good job. As a matter of fact, it was good training for his boat racing commentary and producing that he does to this day. Jerry Jarrett had brought him up because they needed some more announcers. See, Vince had hired Jerry Jarrett to come up in '92 or '3 when the steroid trial got hot, because Vince thought he was going to jail. And he needed somebody to run the company that I guess he thought he could trust who wouldn't run it into the ground, and he picked Jerry Jarrett. But when he didn't go to jail, and Jerry's sitting around there with nothing to do, but one of the moves Jerry made was bring Stan up because, I guess it was '93, because Stan had retired from wrestling. He didn't have the passion anymore, but as an announcer, he's good looking, great voice. So he did that, and after Jerry went home, Stan the same way as I am, same way. Everybody that moves from the south to the north wants to cut their fucking throat. Hate every fucking second of it. And Stan was the same way. Jerry Jarrett was drinking 2 bottles of wine every night in his condo in Stamford, going, my God, I gotta get out of here. Stan fucking hated it. Everybody. So Stan hung on as long as he could, got his money, had insurance, got some kind of surgery done he needed to get, and then he was fucking headed for fucking North Carolina.
Slick Chris thoughts of managing Owen and the Bulldog in WWF as part of Camp Cornette.
They were great. I loved, I liked Yokozuna and I liked Mr. Fuji, but when I first went up there and started managing, those matches were just so bloody fucking awful. Except for Yokozuna and Undertaker. Undertaker, I have ultimate respect for. They're not knocking, they're just doing construction. Undertaker is the greatest gimmick in history of wrestling, great worker, great guy. He could get a great match out of Yokozuna. Nobody else could. And I mean, even though Yoko could move for a 650-pound man, still he was a 650-pound man. So when I got a chance to manage Owen and Bulldog, then at least we got back into some fucking matches. I mean, I wouldn't work up a sweat a lot of times with Yoko, because fuck, it was slow. So, and plus Owen and Bulldog were always ribbing each other, always fucking with each other. We'd do the promos, and there Owen would have the squirt bottle of water they used for the fake sweat. But he while we're standing there waiting to, get the shot blocked, he'd be squirting my crotch in my pants that I didn't know about. It looked like I'd pissed myself. Or we'd look around, and there Owen was standing on a roll of duct tape, so he'd be the tallest one of the bunch of us because we were all three the same height. And then Davy'd stand up on his tiptoes, and then Owen would get a fucking block of wood, and all of a sudden I'd look like Cowboy Lang. Here these guys were just endless. So
Halloween Havoc '89, courtesy of Wrestling Classics. Did you travel with Yokozuna car or plane?
No, I did not. Well, for one thing, at the time I was, from '93 until I started in the office in '96, I was coming up just for TV and pay-per-view from Knoxville because I was running Smoky Mountain full-time. So, me and the Bodies would travel together when they came up with me, but otherwise, I didn't travel with anybody because I was coming from a different place and going back to a different place.
Greg Pike.
And that had to also been I'm sure traveling in the car with Yokozuna was interesting.
Well, yeah, I think that's where he was going with that. Greg Pike, did you ever eat with Yokozuna? How much did he eat?
Well, once again, we would be at TV all day from like noon until midnight. Back in the days when they did 4 shows in a night and whatever, we would be going to do promos. And Fuji was not getting around too good with his hips and his knees. So if the promo room was across the arena, you had to give Fuji a 20-minute head start. And then Yoko, no, seriously. And I'd be sitting over there and I'd be, oh, geez, because I'm like, I want to get this shit done. Boom, we're going to be here 3 hours. We're going to knock this shit out or whatever. And then Yoko's, fiddle fucking around. And then he comes in with a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he would sit there during interviews, in between interviews, he would go through a bucket of chicken as a snack. And it just, I can't imagine how,
Adam Krasnoff of New Orleans asked Jim Cornette, is there any truth to the rumor that Lex Luger was originally booked to win the world title at WrestleMania 10? Rumor is that Lex leaked the original finish of WrestleMania to a news reporter in a bar the night before. DXD asked this as well.
Okay, well, yeah, Lex originally months out was going to win the world title at WrestleMania 10, and then Vince changed his mind well before that, and I don't know if Luger took a leak in a bar the night before or leaked to a reporter or whatever. If he'd leaked the finish, he would have, leaked the original finish. He might have said, yeah, I was supposed to win it. I don't know. I've never heard this rumor, but point is, it wasn't like it was changed overnight.
Gotcha. Video from Adam
Jim
K.
Cornette, it's the one Adam K here. And I was wondering, since you've worked with both Owen Hart and Mr. Fuji, which one was the bigger ribber? And also, did they ever get together to try and pull ribs on other people, or maybe Owen Hart or Mr. Fuji would try to pull ribs on each other?
Okay, well, I think number one, Owen and Fuji were both smart enough not to rib each other. I think Owen had so much respect for his seniors in the business that he would not have tried that with Fuji, and he probably would have put Fuji's over like crazy if Fuji had done it. They never teamed up. That might have been like matter and antimatter colliding.
The world would not have been able to handle it.
Fuji had slowed down quite a bit, because he was older at the time, and I guess he's in his 70s now, so he wasn't doing. But in his day, Dennis Condrey told me when Fuji wrestled in the Alabama territory, I don't know who it was, but this guy comes out of his apartment and gets in his car and starts start his car one day. Nothing, won't turn over, nothing. He gets out, opens the hood. He's looking at the parking lot. There's no engine. Fuji paid somebody to have somebody come and take the engine out of the guy's car and then paid to have it put back in. It's like $1,000 fucking rib just to get the pop out of the guy. So Fuji was big time. Owen's shit was funny and was more, comedic, but Fuji's was sharp. I mean, I've heard a few.
Mark Rand and also Guitar Dude asked what your favorite Owen Hart rib was that was either played on you or somebody else.
Well, okay, and then Eric Smith, we're going to follow up on my favorite Owen Hart rib. Was not even a rib, but he had such a reputation. We're sitting, once again, you'd get to TV at noon, and there'd be nothing going on until 8 o'clock bell time or whatever, except promos, local promos we used to do all day long. So we'd be sitting in a fucking room or in the room next to the promo room. So I'm sitting there one day, and in comes Owen and Davey. And from the next room, and they're carrying this red phone. It looked like the Commissioner Gordon bat phone, right? Is this Alfred? And the wire is out. I think it's certainly the wire. It's not plugged into anything. It's just around the corner, around the door there. But he said, Stu wants to talk to you. What? Okay. Now, they'd been doing the angle where supposedly Sean was after Diana, and it was going to end up that it was all a plot by the Bulldog. That Diana, his Bulldog's wife, had been trying to hit on Sean, and then that's where I used the word fornicator for the first time on WWF, maybe the last, WWF television. Shawn Michaels, you tried to make this woman break her sacred marital bounds. You tried to touch her in her most private of places. You have defiled her with your evil words and deeds. You, Shawn Michaels, you are a fornicator. Well, actually, what happened was they get started where supposedly Sean is after Diana or whatever. And so anyway, Owen comes in with Davey, and they got the phone, the red bat phone. Stu wants to talk to you. What? Stu Hart. I said, hello? Is this Jim Cornette? Yeah, no, of course, Bruce Pritchard does one of the better Stu Hart. I mean, everybody did Stu Hart, right? But Bruce does one of the better Stu Harts. I'm thinking it's fucking Bruce. He's going to be around the fucking corner. So I'm like, yeah, Stu, what are you doing? Just wondering why that you're doing this thing with Diana, making her look like a whore. She's making it's rough on the kids, and it makes her look like a whore. And she's got, I said, well, you know who it is, don't you? No, it's that Vince had control of, oh no, it's that Bruce Pritchard. You know, he's one of those fucking preverts. You know, he goes to the adult bookstores, he's wearing the raincoat, he's doing the 5-knuckle shuffle, he reads the smut. Everything with him is about sex and smut and dildos and hookers and everything. This was all his idea. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to talk to Vince about this. I didn't know that about Bruce. Yeah, it's all his fault. Anyway, so we have to talk for like 5 minutes, right? I'm thinking, when's he gonna come to the fucking point? As soon as I hang up, I said, who the fuck was that? And right then, Bruce Pritchard walks in from this room, not the room that the phone corded. He said, that was Stu. Owen said, that was Stu. That was my dad. Oh, Bruce, I think I just told Stu Hart you're a fucking pervert. You know, anyway. So it wasn't a rib, but it was a rib.
Wonderful. Graham McPhail. Question all the way from Scotland. Why does Jim think Vader, who he was managing at the time, was ultimately a flop as top line star in WWF back in the 90s, seemed to tick every box Vince wants for a big monster heel, but it just never worked out?
I don't think he was a flop. I don't think he did nearly as well as he should have. I think part of the problem was Shawn Michaels. Leon was he's a big, rough, mean, you know, former pro football player, and he was a stiff, hard-hitting guy, and he was but he was he was a big teddy bear also personally. And you could hurt his feelings just like that. And Shawn Michaels is used to everybody, or was used to everybody catering to him, and also was used to people working with him a lot lighter. And I remember one time it was in fucking Tulsa. It was at a house show in Tulsa. There, Leon's got him by the hand and he's fucking peppered him right, boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden I see Shawn gets out of it and grabs some kind of hold and there's a conversation. I'm like, what the fuck? And then they go on and they go to the finish a couple minutes later and Leon rolls. Of course, Leon lost. It's another thing, a big monster. You know, Frankenstein kicked a few villagers' asses first to get over. Leon rolls out and he's crying. He said, Shawn Michaels told me if I yanked his hair that way, that'd be my job, and he's going to get me fired. And then at SummerSlam 96, go back and watch the fucking tape. Some way or another, Shawn's going to come off the top with a fucking elbow, and Leon's supposed to move, and Leon don't move. And Shawn changes gear in midair and fucking lands right next to him and screams, move! Kicks him. Move, asshole, or dumb shit, or whatever. Shawn Michaels, he was unprofessional. He was always on fucking pills or whatever. And by the way, Shawn, fuck you too. For the way you fucking talked to me, for the way you talked to Jose Lothario that got you in the business, for the way that you fucking got with your little clique and fucking exposed the business in Madison Square Garden and kowtowed, and everybody had to kowtow to you, and you're whining and you lost your smile and you didn't want to do jobs, and wherever you were pilled up doing whatever the fuck you were doing, you were a fucking asshole and a prick. And if you found God, that's generally because I've noticed people in this business that find God do so when everybody else hates them so bad they won't speak to them. When mortals won't speak to you, you find a higher power. But anyway, between all this stuff going, Shawn didn't want to work with Leon. He didn't want to take the fucking ass kicking. He came with working with Leon. They didn't book Leon. Vince wanted to change his name to the Mastodon. I said, it's fucking Vader. He was a WCW world champion. Everybody in the world knows who he is. Well, we can trademark it. He's a big mastodon. Fuck. So Leon, he just didn't fit. The fucking guys that he was supposed to work with didn't get him over. Leon was a high maintenance individual also, and that didn't help him. It just didn't fucking work.
The Michaels incident is chronicled by Vader on our Ringside with Vader disc.
As a matter of fact, I'd like to see that as well.
You can have it. I have one in my bag for you. Halloween Havoc 89 asked, is it true that Vader never washed his ring attire to upset his opponents?
No, he just never washed his ring attire. I think one day it wasn't to upset his opponents. It just that shit. The mask was leather. You can't wash leather. And his other stuff, spandex, I don't know how many outfits he had. They all looked the same to me, so I have a feeling it was only one.
I was going to say.
And maybe, you wash something, but he's a big man, he sweated a lot, so.
Guitar Dude wants to know if you have any good Mantor stories.
Mike Halleck, the reason they're asking, because it's not known by a lot of people, but I managed him very briefly. I was at a WWF TV taping, and I see this guy walking around with a fucking, what was it? Was it a bull, or was it a... What head did he have? Was it a giant?
Yeah.
What was it?
I think it was a boar.
A boar?
No, it was some kind
of... Like a minotaur.
Yeah. But anyway, had the thing on it like Yukon Moose Cholak in the fucking 60s. And they came up to me and said, "Yeah, there's your new guy," because nobody said I was managing this fellow, and I'd never seen him before. And I said, "What?" And I thought it was a rib on me, and then the rib persisted right up to the time he's going. Go with your guy. I'm like, okay, and I went out there, and you know, big impressive looking guy, probably not the best timing, you know, in the ring, and it just didn't fit. And shortly thereafter, it was, you know, but.
Brad Dykins, OnlineWorldOfWrestling.com. Your opinion of Ahmed Johnson?
Great googly moogly. Ahmed Johnson.
Any opportunity I get today to have you do a little black for me? We had Ernie Ladd before. We're making a ton of money up here.
I can do some more Ernie Ladd. Let me tell you something. I'm the big cat Ernie Ladd. I'm 6'9". I weigh 325 pounds, and I covers the ground I walks on. I'm big enough to step on toes and keep on walking. Or if he's gonna give you a finish, Ernie would say, "Now I tell you what you do. You shine him up a little bit, and then you get some heat on him. You're gonna waltz him across Texas. You're gonna make him sell like he's going to the electric chair. You're gonna give him his comeback to the locker room." Or he told Darso one time, "Fat Darso, come over here, sit under the learning tree." Ernie was fucking great. Ernie was the classic interview of all time. Ahmed Johnson, so much less so. Ahmed was a great big looking guy. It was kind of stiff in the ring, but you could not understand a word that came out of his mouth. And somewhere or another, I don't know where it came from, I think it was a commercial or whatever, that's why I said that. Because every time he'd be on TV starting to talk, the guys sitting around the monitor would go, "Great googly moogly," because they couldn't understand a word he was fucking saying.
Richard Luck of Camden, London. Dear Mr. Cornette, how did the NWA WWF Invasion Angle come about? Thanks for the years of great entertainment and for tearing Joey Styles into one. Very best wishes. I so much more want you to address the Joey Styles.
Okay,
Let's start with the NWA.
Well, real quick, and I was off the creative team by this point, and I think it was some Vince Russo fucking. I actually think they were fucking with me on this one, folks, because it was like, well, he's so far in the past, and you know, he's fucking stuck in the 80s or whatever. Let's have him be cranky and come out and lead this contingent of people who are affiliated or associated with the NWA trying to fuck with sports entertainment. But when I started doing the fucking interviews, what people want with wrestling these days is wrestling. Blah, blah, blah. This was 10 years ago. They played it on the big screen at Raw in the building. The people started cheering. And Russo couldn't understand this. His head was blowing up. Why would wrestling fans, which I'll talk more about later, why would wrestling fans want wrestling on their wrestling show? So then the Rock and Roll Express or Barry Windham or Jeff Jarrett, whoever it was, they just beat them like fucking drums. I had Dan Severn. They managed to make Dan Severn the fucking beast, the fucking only Triple Crown Ultimate Fighting Championship winner ever. A guy who had 100 fucking plus amateur and collegiate and national and world wrestling championships. They made him a fucking putz. So it was just, I was glad it was over with, didn't want to be a part of it, and, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, right, here we go.
Jolly Joker. Oh, and follow up on Joey Styles.
Joey Styles.
Well, I've never had a crossword with Joey Styles. I've not been around him that much. I've maybe had 3 or 4 conversations with him because I've never been to the same place, same time. But I was reading all this stuff that during the election that he was writing. He's one of these fucking right-wing radical Republicans, conservative. I call them the 3 C's: conservative Christian cocksuckers. Just because they're miserable in life doesn't mean everybody else has to be. And he's writing all this stuff at Barack Hussein Obama, and he's a guy, he's born in Kenya, and he's a fucking Muslim and all this stuff. And I did my modest little podcast called Who's Slamming Who with Tommy Fierro, where I just blistered fucking Joey Styles, and immediately my downloads doubled, and everybody started saying, "Hey, wait. I got a few letters from Republicans, but, you know, they couldn't really spell all the curse words correctly." And then evidently it got back to the office, and they made Joey Styles quit twittering or twattering or tittering or whatever the fuck it is that he was doing. But, can I just ask my own question? I know that a lot of people are just mad the black guy won, right? And I know that a lot of people are just fucking miserable. But here you've got a choice. Okay, let's say you get sick in the United States of America, supposedly the greatest country in the world. You get sick. Here's the choices you've got. You get sick, but you got insurance, so it pays your doctor bills. Or you get sick, and you got insurance, but you got a pre-existing condition, or they find a loophole and they don't pay your doctor bills and you go bankrupt. Or you get sick and you're self-employed or you're not insured or whatever and you go bankrupt. Or you get sick and you go to the doctor and the government pays for it. Some way or another, the Republicans have managed to prey upon people that are so mad that the black guy won that they would rather go bankrupt to preserve the glory of the United States of America than to fucking have the government pay for their fucking health care. I've paid approximately, probably $1.5 million in income tax over the last 25 years. If I get sick, they ought to have a nurse come to my house and blow me for free. Fuck you Republicans, you're fucking old, rich, white, crooked assholes. They don't like, if you're gay, you ain't in a fucking club. Oh, gay people can't get married and be miserable like the rest of us. No, because that's a sin against God. If you're black, they don't want you. Hispanic, they don't want you. Fucking not religious, they really don't want you because George Carlin or fucking Bill Maher or somebody might smarten up your fucking suckers. What the fuck's going on that you're fucking doing to them? So if you're not in the club, which is basically rich, white, crooked, Republican, and generally old, they don't want you. Guess what? We would like to have something for our taxes. We would like to have people talking to us instead of at us. George Bush bungled the goddamn war. We have still, almost 10 years later, have still not even begun to fucking find the guy that did it, but we bought it. Broke it. You broke it, you bought it. We broke a fucking country, now we bought that. They didn't have anything to fucking do with it. Sure, they were fucking cave people with automatic weapons. But they weren't going to do anything immediately. Find the guy that fucked with you first before you go out changing the fucking world. Bush and Cheney and the rest of these fucking morons were trying to wage a holy war. My God's dick is bigger than your God. No wonder the Muslims want to blow us up and fuck with us because they think that we're trying to take their God away from them. I got news for you. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in a supreme being, an invisible man in the sky. But if I did, and somebody from fucking Iraq or Kuwait came over and said, well, you're wrong and we're going to fuck your God up, well, then I'm fighting for my God, right? Which is what Bush and Cheney did. They have instigated a holy war between the Muslims and the Christians when in actuality, as John Lennon said, imagine there's no religion. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Let's work on not fucking blowing each other up first, morons. Maybe that would be a fucking thought for the elected officials of the various countries of the world. Just don't blow each other up. Don't worry about who goes to church on Sunday or fucking who's fucking who or what sex they are or what color they are or whatever. Just don't blow each other up. And maybe give us a doctor every once in a while. $250 antibiotics for 8 days for a sinus infection, right? Just give us a doctor every once in a while. Don't let the pharmaceutical companies fuck us in the ass. Don't let the politicians fuck us in the ass. And don't blow us up. We'll take care of the other shit. I've noticed that the Democrats are more, the ones I see on television are more like people I'd like to sit in the same room with, and the Republicans are more like people that I would like to set fire to.
He's down about 10 pounds, too. We were talking about that before, too.
Get me off the sugar, you see, I'm not very fucking...
He's calm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what Jimmy James has to say for us today.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Cornette, it's an honor to speak with you. Jimmy James here from OffTheMarkShow.com. And I just want to give your book about the Midnight Express a cheap plug here. I haven't picked it up yet. Before I do, I just want to ask you, how many chapters do you have devoted to the new Midnight Express with bombastic Bob Holly and bodacious Bart Gunn? I really hope they didn't make the cut because they kind of suck dick.
Was it Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart or Bodacious Bob and Bombastic?
No, it was Bombastic Bob.
Whatever. Okay, this is going to be a real quick story. I'm at home. I'm off the creative team at this point, the WWF. I'm at home in Stamford. I'm working in the office with other shit. And it had to get to Vince that the entire time that I worked for Vince McMahon, when I was managing Yokozuna, his world champion, managing Owen and Davey, whatever, when I would travel with Vince, because at the time, when I was first on the creative team, it was me, Bruce Pritchard, Jim Ross, and Vince McMahon in the car to the TVs. We'd go in the convenience store, we'd go in the hotel, whatever. Everybody said, Jim Cornette, Midnight Express. Not Jim Cornette Yokozuna, Jim Cornette owned it. Jim Cornette, Midnight Express, obviously. Right? He had to wonder. So one day, phone rings, I pick it up, the bat phone. Nobody has his number. Pick it up in my house, what? It's Vince. Well, we're thinking about putting together a new Midnight Express. What? Why? Well, Bob Holly and Bart Gunn. We don't have anything for them to do. We think they'll be a good tag team. I'm thinking, and there's him and Russo over there sitting around. And Russo's trying to figure out some way to fuck with me. Either that, or he's just wondering why everybody recognizes me for the Midnight Express. Cause he'd never seen the Midnight Express because he never watched any wrestling. So anyway, I call Bobby Eaton. I said, Bobby, here's what they want to do. What do you think? I said, is it okay with you? Because I didn't want them guys not to get a spot, and also I'm trying to be the fucking company guy, right? I've gotten out of that fucking state of mind the past few years. Bobby said, no, Corny is wrestling. Do whatever you want to do. So we try to put together, and I have them come up and I teach them some Midnight Express tag team moves. It's not that they weren't accomplished workers, but they'd never been a tag team, so we got to have some basis start. Taught them some Midnight Express moves. And then they come up with, well, it didn't have to be alliterative. Didn't have to be Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart. It was Beautiful Bobby and Sweet Stan, but it was also Loverboy Dennis. It just worked out that way, and that was them. There was nothing bombastic or bodacious about Bart and Bob. And so at any rate, then they start using them as a team, and then finally I was on the road going to the shows with them for about a month, and then a combination of two things happened. One, Russo came up with that ridiculous brawl for all that not only destroyed Steve Williams' career, but cost the WWF between $5 and $10 million in one night, which I actually brought up to him. I said, hey, well, what do you think now, Russo? You fucking cost the company $10 million in one night with your fucking stupid idea. And got everybody hurt, because, you know, if as Watts used to say, if Vince Russo was walking through a men's locker room, he'd be whistling Stranger in Paradise. He's never been in a fight or an athletic contest. He's a piece of fucking shit that blames the boys for his shortcomings. But anyway, he booked Bob Holly against Bart Gunn in the Brawl for All, thinking, well, that'll be intriguing, because now these two partners that have been together for 5 fucking weeks are going to have a real fight amongst each other. And secondly, we were in Atlantic City, New Jersey, at the old, where they used to have the Miss America pageant, right? First match of the night, the new Midnight Express loses. I can't remember, it might have been to the Headbangers. And I loved the Headbangers, gave them that gimmick, and love Glenn and Chaz this day. But I went back, and there's Jim Ross working on his book. No, I didn't go back. I went Monday at TV. That was Saturday night in Atlantic City. Monday I went up and said, guess what? Jim Cornette officially retires as a manager again. I don't need the money this bad. My Midnight Express team is doing a job in the first match in Atlantic City, and they're not even the Midnight Express, and now they're going to be fighting each other on television, which means that the team is out the fucking window. Oh no, we're not going to break them up. They're just, because this is real. They want the money. No, fuck you. For any amount of money, tag team partners don't fight each other if they're a great tag team. So anyway, I retired as a manager, and they had the fight, and they never had another tag team match.
Eric Smith, during the Monday Night Wars, did WWF air Nitro in the back for the boys to watch?
No. They were keeping an eye on it in the truck, but no, they were hoping the boys were watching what they were actually doing.
Anthony Militek, how long were you a booker in WWE, and what ideas that you came up with did WWE use other than Hell in a Cell?
Well, I was on the creative team from February of '96 until I believe December of '97. Yeah, I mean, I threw finishes in or tweaked things. The thing is, you had to pass everything by Vince. And there was a problem with, first, when it was me and Bruce Pritchard, Bruce would always tell me, oh, Vince ain't gonna like that. Well, let's ask him. Oh, no. Bruce thought he knew, and I love Bruce, I don't have a problem with, but Bruce thought he knew what Vince wasn't gonna like, and chances are he's probably right. And I love Pat Patterson, and Pat was a great talent, a great worker, and was the mastermind behind the Royal Rumble and could do great battle royals. But when Bruce and Pat would get together, it all had to be funny. And it had to cross over from funny to silly. And they were just entertaining themselves, and I was tearing my fucking hair out. And then, then you couldn't do anything without Vince McMahon blessing it. And then when Russo came on, because the way that Russo got his fucking spot on the creative team, he had sucked up, and he was a magazine editor and can't even spell. He's a magazine editor, can't fucking spell, can't fucking write. But he was constantly pitching these ideas. And finally they did a Raw, and I believe it was probably like February or March, early of '97. overseas, they just taped a show with lousy equipment and lousy lighting. It was just a cold ass fucking house show with no angle matches and no interviews. And they taped it and brought it over, and we voiced it. And I knew it sucked when I voiced it, because I was doing a commentary. I played with Jim Ross that night. I knew when I heard what they were going to do that it was going to be the shits. Because why go overseas and fucking shoot a Raw house show and bring it back and air it as Raw? It was just bad. But that was the what's the opposite of apex? The low point. The lowest rating ever for a Raw, while the other guys were kicking ass. And instead of saying, okay, we shouldn't have shot an overseas show and put a bunch of cold matches with bad lighting and commentary done in the studio over the top of the tape on television and shot it as Raw, Vince McMahon decided, oh goddamn, now we got to do something. Fuck all this shit. Vince Russo, you've been standing over here saying we have dogs fucking each other and transvestites and all this other shit, so come on over here. And Vince Russo, he would sit outside Vince McMahon's fucking office till 9 o'clock at night. He would blow off his kids' fucking softball games with these stacks of paper, and Vince McMahon was desperate because all of a sudden he's getting beat, and he never gets beat, and Nitro's beating him in the ratings instead of just having some good fucking wrestling with some good fucking wrestlers. Now he's got to reinvent the wheel. So the two of those fucking heads get together, talk about matter and antimatter, and then I was having to sit there in a room with the one guy who's the boss, who you can talk to when you get a chance, but he's listening, whoever he's listening to at the time, he hears better. And I got this guy who I'm trying to explain what a fucking hammerlock is to, because Vince Russo, I was there the first night he was inside the rail. He was doing commentary for fucking WWF New York, because with that New York accent he's got, the people on Channel 9 were the only ones who could understand what the fuck he was saying. My ex one time was like, I don't understand a goddamn word he said. What the fuck's he saying? Anyway, to do it on camera, he sits inside the rail, and he's already on the creative team. And we're coming, he's at the desk right inside the rail, and he come back, he said, that was cool. I said, what? He said, being inside the rail for a match. He's writing the fucking show, and he's got a Woody because he was inside the guardrail for the first time ever while a wrestling match was going on. So I'm trying to deal with him, and I'm starting to get a fucking twitch because he knows nothing and he doesn't want to know anything, and he thinks he knows what he's fucking doing. And yes, okay, when we shoot an angle in November between The Undertaker and Kane, but they're not going to have a match until fucking March. Naturally, when Kane gets heat on The Undertaker the next week has to choke slam Kane through a fucking announcer's table. I said, okay, that's the middle of November. What are we going to do till the end of March? You fucking idiot. Anyway, so what was the question?
I don't even remember.
I don't even know. What ideas did I come up with? I threw in finishes. I'm sure some of you would have seen some of them. I had ideas about guys. They left me alone with Kane for quite a bit. Of his first introduction. I was real proud of that, and to be quite honest, my original thought of Kane was Michael Myers in Halloween, my favorite horror movie. I thought that maybe the vignettes you would see through the eye holes, and you would hear the muffled breathing, and you would see pictures of the Undertaker, all over, like the serial killer thing, like the Omen with the Bible pages all over the walls, and just hear and you know, that type of thing. Of course, they superheroed him all out. But the way that he debuted at Hell in a Cell St. Louis, Bad Blood, was a combination of Kevin Sullivan's ideas that he had already used and things that I'd seen. The Hell in a Cell cage was the old Memphis cage, where it encompassed the entire ringside area. And it was the War Games cage because it had a top on it. Mm-hmm. And how did Kevin Sullivan as Booker in Knoxville introduce Doug Furnas, the world's strongest man, as a babyface on Christmas night of '87 in Knoxville? When the heels were kicking the shit out of the babyface, here comes Doug Furnas, University of Tennessee football hero, and rips the door off the cage. Never been done since. I said, motherfucker. How about the Undertaker's brother, who we've heard about but haven't seen yet, makes his debut? But Shawn Michaels, the Undertaker, in Hell in a Cell, and here comes Kane, rips the door off, confronts his fucking brother, tombstones his fucking brother. Shawn Michaels wins. We get out of that fucking deal. Shawn Michaels has always got to win, or else he won't show up. And then Undertaker and Kane have this big program, and that worked. And then we started having, and Kane couldn't be just a wrestler, because then he's not fucking a monster. He's one of the boys. So instead of booking him in matches, a match is going on, and the fucking boom, the music hits and the red lighting, and here comes fucking Kane and goddamn choke slams people and does all this stuff and says, it's gonna be on your head, Undertaker. Undertaker won't fight his brother. But Kane says, I'm gonna fucking demolish everybody until I force you to fight me. This is what takes us to WrestleMania. Of course, Russo, Mr. fucking Wrestling, is gonna have the choke slam through the announcer's table 2 weeks after the fucking Angle, and we got 3 months to go, 4 months to go, and all that shit. But it was great, and actually the highlight, and this was Gaga, but it was funny. It was funny Gaga. Every week on TV, Kane appears by the red lights going on and the music going, and he comes down and destroys everybody that's in the ring. Right, heel, babyface, referee. He don't give a fuck. The apex of that was when we had the fucking Mexican minis and the 6-man mini match with Sonny as referee. And by the way, I'm trying to lay that match out in a basement of a small building that we were in where there's water pipes like this, and I'm trying to show Sonny how to leapfrog the fucking midget. But anyway, when those midgets are running around doing their spots and Sonny's in her referee shorts with her Snavensis, and all of a sudden the music hits and that red light, here comes Kane and the pyro blows, people just shit themselves. That's humor in and then the fucking midgets run everywhere, and of course he didn't hurt any of them. But that's funny, entertaining wrestling stuff. It doesn't have to be silly. It doesn't have to expose the business as phony. It's just when we're in 12 feet of snow, right? When somebody's walking across the street and you're sitting in a fucking restaurant at a table or whatever, you're watching them, and they fucking slip and they fall and their fucking grocery bag goes up in the air and the canned peas come down and hit them in the head, you laugh, right? You laugh. Because, oh, look at the guy fucking slipped and fell. But not if the guy with the grocery bag walking across the street walks and all of a sudden stops and looks to make sure people are watching him and then takes a big fucking bump on purpose. That ain't fucking funny, because he's just doing it to fucking tickle you. It's the shit that you just strikes you as funny that should be funny in wrestling. Anyway, I got off.
Very good. Decca Durabalin of F4W Online. How often did you talk to Dave Meltzer when you were on the booking crew for WWE?
Actually, not as much as I usually have before or since, because he knocked my fucking pay-per-view match with Jose Lothario and also my fucking weight at that point in time. I was pissed at him, but I was aggravation eating. I got up to 278 pounds at my height in WWF. I would eat 3-4 fucking dinners. I was just eating like I'm gonna kill fucking Russo. I hate this fucking shit. I hate fucking Connecticut. I want to go home. Blah blah blah.
Guitar Dude, courtesy of Figure 4 Online. What was your part/knowledge of the Bret Hart screw job?
Oh, and I/hate/Russo, I like you, adds that the Observer listed Jim as one of the few in that meeting days before, along with JR and Shawn Michaels. Whoa, no, Shawn Michaels wasn't anywhere in the meeting. See, here's the thing. There's no way we can even begin to cover this. Dave Meltzer did several wrestling observers in its entirety on this, but Shawn didn't want to put Bret over. Bret didn't want to put Shawn over because Shawn had always told Bret that he would never put him over. Vince was trying to get the fucking match in the ring. Vince signed Bret to a contract that he couldn't fucking fulfill, and then gave Bret the option to fucking negotiate with WCW, but forgot to take the belt off of him. So Bret's going to take a job with WCW, but he still got the fucking belt. Shawn and is acting like a fucking 2-year-old kid. I don't blame Bret, to be quite honest, for not wanting to put the fucking prick over, because he always told Bret, I'll never put you over. But by the same token, here's Shawn making a fucking $1 million a year, or whatever the fuck he was making. Okay, maybe it was only $750. I'm sorry, Mr. Christian. And there's Bret leaving a job where he's making $1.5 million, going to get a job where he's making $2.5 million. Meanwhile, I am sitting at Vince McMahon's fucking kitchen table every goddamn Wednesday for 12 hours with Vince McMahon and Vince Russo, wanting to blow my fucking brains out for $125,000 or whatever. So there was no babyface. It was a heel program as far as I was concerned. And Shawn was always on the phone with Vince, and then Bret would be on it. Vince was trying to work everything out. Russo was sitting there as he usually does with deer caught in the headlights, fucking pie plate eyes, not knowing what to fucking do. And I was fucking fed up with the whole thing, and basically they ran 18 finishes by, and the night before Montreal, I had suggested a bunch. Everybody suggested no finish was good enough for anybody involved in this fucking thing, and McMahon had told story after story to each person that he was going to go with them, and then they were mad when he wasn't. So basically, I asked him the night before the production meeting, I said, have you got it finished? He said, yes. I said, good. That's all I needed to fucking know. And I watched, and as soon as I saw it, I'm sitting at the monitor, and I knew what a fucking double cross was. My God, Russo didn't. Russo didn't even know the fucking phrase until I said, well, there's a double cross. What? But I said, well, there we go. That's how he got out of it. And I grabbed my bag and hit the fucking car. I was out before they even got back from the ring. I beat Hebner out of the building. Not because I was afraid anybody was going to punch me out, because I didn't want to be involved in the whole goddamn thing. It was fucking stupid. Here's a bunch of fucking millionaires arguing about a goddamn finish of a fucking wrestling match. And...
Well, to follow up on that, Mark O'Connell asks, how would you have resolved the Montreal situation? Had you been in McMahon's shoes, and the night Owen died, would you have continued the show if the buck stopped? So two different questions. Take Montreal first.
Montreal first. Before I told Brett I can't pay you the amount of money I promised to pay you on this contract, I would have said, Brett, I need you to drop the belt. Fucking, I even suggested, I said, put Ken Shamrock in the fucking ring with him if he don't want to drop the fucking belt. Because he'll beat the piss out of Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart could beat Shawn Michaels so fucking silly that he wouldn't even know what fucking hit him. I said, if you're afraid he ain't gonna drop it, book him with Shamrock, for fuck's sake. But I would have taken the belt off of Bret, and then I would have said, Bret, I'm a fucking idiot, and I promise you I can pay you this money, and I can't pay you. So let's you and me work together and see if we can get some of fucking Bischoff's money for you, take care of you, and thank you very much. That would have been easy. But then the belt and the Shawn Michaels thing, there was no way Bret Hart was going to put Shawn Michaels over, and there's no way Shawn Michaels was going to put Bret Hart over. That's what the whole fucking deal was.
But as a company
and in the
owner,
old days, if the fans had sensed that, then they would have got together and done the biggest business ever. But no, they really just didn't like each other and didn't give a fuck.
But as a former company owner and a booker yourself, a boss, was that at the last straw position there? I mean, I assume as a booker you only pull out the screw job when you have to.
Oh yeah, it was it was going to be the last straw one way or the other. Yeah, and Vince always said, his father always said, get the match in the ring, and that's the old time promoter's credo: get the match in the ring. But you're the one who booked the fucking match. You should have known there was going to be troubles. How did we get there? I was in the fucking meetings, and when everybody was writing those names down, nobody had said, oh, but goddamn, there's going to be trouble. And then all of a sudden, as soon as they make the match, nobody wants to fucking do it. And plus, Vince McMahon has always catered to fucking people. I don't know why. He gives them the opinion that they're superstars. Even the fucking guys the last 10 years, he's ruined their fucking head because now they're comedians and character actors and entertainers and movie stars and all this. No, they're wrestlers. I was a wrestling manager, then I became a wrestling booker. You're fucking wrestlers. That's what we do. We're in the wrestling business. I'm proud of it. Don't know why everybody else ain't. But I haven't seen a lot of goddamn great thespians. Maybe a few of the divas are thespians. We just don't know it yet. And Owen, yes, boom, stopped on the spot. I tell you what, if Buck had stopped with me, Owen wouldn't have been up there. It's nothing Vince Russo, but maybe that's why he found God, because he killed Owen Hart. Fuck you, Vince Russo. Owen Hart would have not been up. One of the best wrestlers on the fucking roster, had done everything. He didn't want to be up there. It was Vince Russo's silly ass idea that a great wrestler like Owen Hart needs something to get over, and gonna do the blue blazer because it was funny, because he did it before 10 years ago, so we're gonna do it again because everybody remembers. See, here's the thing with Vince Russo. Everybody remembers Chief Jay Strongbow's social security number. If it happened at the Nassau Coliseum in 1974, everybody remembers that. But if it's NWA history from fucking 10 years ago, why, who would ever remember something like that? You fucking moron. But he put Owen in the blue blazer outfit and he fucking hung him up there. And Owen didn't want to fucking do it. He didn't want to do the run through. He didn't want to do the whole goddamn thing. He thought it was stupid, but he was trying to be a company guy. And Vince McMahon, I'm sorry, but you tolerated Vince Russo doing shit like that and fucking your company up and then fucking you and then going down and putting WCW out of business. Everybody who tolerates Vince Russo, in my opinion, gets what they deserve. And I admit some culpability in letting Jeff Dutch tell, and I still like Dutch. I ain't too warm on Jeff right now. I love you, Jeffrey, as a person, and I love your grandmother. Your father started me into business. But Big Rib, Jeff, talking me into fucking coexisting with Vince Russo for 3 fucking years. I told you how it was going to turn out, and it turned out that way. It just took longer than I thought. And also, by the way, Dixie Carter, you employ Vince Russo. About $40 million of your father's money that he dug up out of the ground has been thrown back in a fucking oil well that fucking Vince Russo dug because you're too stupid to fucking figure out that everybody else in the business ain't wrong. You are. Vince Russo's a fucking idiot. But anyway, so yes, I would have stopped the fucking show.
Eric Smith, did you get along with Triple H?
Yeah, I did until when he first got there, you know, I mean, he was one of the guys, you know, fine, etc. I was in the fucking office, he was one of the boys. When they did that curtain call thing, and I mean, I wasn't the only one mad. I was throwing my fucking suit bag down the goddamn Madison Square Garden hallway. I assume everybody knows what the curtain call is. I don't need to go into it. Jerry Briscoe was kicking fucking walls. He wanted to fucking stretch all of them as soon as they came back. Everybody was fucking hot because they took a shit on Vince McMahon's dining room table, the guy that was paying them. The Madison Square Garden show was to his father and to him at that time the yardstick measure of success in a business. And just because they had their little billionaire boys tree club, they had to go out and expose the business and have a big fucking circle jerk. And okay, who was Vince McMahon going to discipline? It was Kevin Nash's last night. It was Scott Hall's last night. Shawn Michaels was the champion. So Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who was supposed to win the King of the Ring, didn't win the King of the Ring. Cost him about $100,000 to $150,000 that year, probably, and what he would have made and what he did make. He was punished because he went along with the other three fucking guys. So I actually went up to him. I said, look, I said, you made a mistake. You let these other guys, I said, who got punished? You got punished. I told Helmsley this. I said, because he ain't gonna fucking discipline Shawn because he's a champion. What's he gonna do to Hall and Nash? So you got it. So you let these guys get you to a position you should have done it. You shit on the business. All the guys are hot at you. And he had been told to apologize. He went around and apologized to everybody, to all the boys, Helmsley did. And he apologized to me. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. It was fucking bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Seemed very genuine. What happens? A couple years goes by. Well, meanwhile, also, Steve Austin wins the 96 King of the Ring. So thank you, because the curtain call, if nothing else, gave us one of the biggest stars in the biggest star in the history of the business. But then a couple years goes by, and now Russo's work shoot shit's in full mode. And there they play some fan's camcorder on Raw of the curtain call, and Helmsley said, I apologize, but I knew we were revolutionizing the business. He never meant it. He was a fucking kiss ass and a suck up then. He's apparently, well, now he doesn't need to kiss ass and suck up because he's licking the right crack. So therefore he doesn't need to suck anybody. But the point is, he didn't mean it when he apologized to me. He didn't mean it when he apologized to the boys. He didn't mean it when he was saying he was sorry that he exposed the business. And so, you know, he's got, as his brow increases from steroid or HGH use, so does his ego from fucking being irreplaceable because he's got the keys to the kingdom. Because he's fucking married to the boss's daughter who took the job as head of creative straight out of college. I think Stephanie's a bright girl, and I never had a crossword with her, but she needs to be the head of creative like I need to be the head of fucking NASA. Because I know as much about the fucking Hubble Space Telescope as she knows about fucking booking wrestling. It's fucking ridiculous. Nepotism and fucking corporations have led us to where we are in the wrestling business, which is why Dana White and the UFC are kicking all of our asses, because they're doing pro wrestling from 30 years ago, and they're doing it better than we are.
Sebastian?
Now, let me say one more thing about it.
Go right ahead.
I got to bring this up before we go into Volume 6. Vince Russo recently, this is another thing, Vince Russo recently gets on the fucking internet. And he's mad because somebody actually called him on his shit and said, by the way, one of those 2-hour TNA Impact shows only had 16 minutes of fucking wrestling in a 2-hour show. So he gets on he's promoting a book. I wasn't aware Vince Russo had ever read a book. I'm surprised he's written one. But he's promoting his fucking book, and he says, I have so many things I want to do with my life. I want to make my father laugh. I want to play baseball with my kids. I want to blah, 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 blah. I can't imagine how anybody could have such a miserable life that they would sit there with a stopwatch and time how many minutes of fake wrestling are in a fake wrestling show. That's an exact quote from Vince Russo. Puts this on the internet. Of course, immediately the shitstorm starts. And I guess people in the company, I know Taz, thank you Taz, a lot of people in the company, outside the company, fans, people in the business, So the very next week, he's back on his Twitter or his internet or whatever the fuck he is with this heartfelt apology about how he didn't realize what he was saying. He's just a New Yorker. He shot his mouth off. And it's not that he doesn't like wrestling. It's just that he doesn't like fake kind of wrestling. That's why he likes to try to write all his shows to be real. And he doesn't like the word booker. He's a TV writer. He hates the word booker. See, we couldn't be any more opposite. We are diametrically opposed. We are the bizarro component of each other. He's a northerner, I'm a southerner. He wants to be a writer, I wanted to be a booker. He's a Christian, I'm an atheist. He hates wrestling, I love wrestling. If one of us was a black lesbian nun, we'd have it all fucking covered. But anyway, I don't know what I'm more astonished by. That Vince Russo was completely, utterly gobsmacked to hear that what he wrote was offensive to everybody that's ever made a dime in the wrestling business or everybody that's ever considered themselves a wrestling fan, or whether I'm more astonished that he genuinely, delusionally, literally believes that he has once in his life written a wrestling show that anybody could possibly believe was real. I burst into flames whenever I hear things that he says, whenever I hear his voice, whenever I look at him. It's like a sudden itching powder thrown up my fucking crotch because he is so utterly disrespectful and unsuited and unqualified and has been completely unsuccessful at this business, but it's always everybody else's fault. He wrote recently, well, the boys got complacent for a while there, but now that the new regime is in and some of the new talent's in, maybe they'll step up their game. Why don't you step up your fucking booking, fucking genius? And he says, well, I'm a TV writer. I'm paid to produce ratings. I can't worry about, how much wrestling. Well, then you're not getting fucking paid. You're paid to produce ratings. When have you produced any ratings? He tries to take credit for Steve Austin and The Rock. But if something doesn't work out, it was somebody else's fault. Standards and practices in fucking TBS. Or blah, 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 blah. I could go on endlessly. It's just there's so much material. But I just wanted to get that in there. Once again, fuck you.
Okay. Sebastian, Quebec City, Canada. Can you explain your theory or thoughts on why Shane McMahon left WWE? Is it because Vince doesn't listen to his opinions or the advice that Shane brings to the company?
I have no theory and no opinion and no first-hand knowledge otherwise than I believe that Shane McMahon, more than anything else, and I think Shane's a great guy, and more than anything else, he always wanted to be his father. And he believed in the McMahon name, the McMahon family, the McMahon dynasty, and he wanted to sit in that chair one day, and when he found out, I believe, that his little sister and the fucking wrestler that she married and how I would have bet my house and car and life 10 years ago that Vince McMahon's daughter would marry a wrestler you'd look up and see a donkey flying over, and it happened. I think Shane finally realized, well, fuck it. She's going to run the place. Fucking slope-headed caveman, as long as he keeps fucking pumping out the kids and everything, it's going to go that way. And so I'm going to go do my own shit. And I hope he does. And I hope he is a giant success at it.
Greg Pike, biggest WWF/E payday.
I'm embarrassed to say this as a performer. Now, I got 6 figures out of him for the Smoky Mountain Library, and I got 5 figures as my share of the OVW Library, and I got other. But as a talent, I'm ashamed to say $15,000 for WrestleMania 10. I'd heard all about the WrestleMania and the pay-per-view and these huge checks, right? And I'm managed the WWF champion twice, Yoko versus Luger and Yoko versus Bret Hart, on a sold-out Madison Square Garden, and I got $5,000 more than I got for Starrcade '86 when it was just down in little old Greensboro on closed circuit. So as far as I'm concerned, for WWF, big payoffs. Of course, they get them now.
DXD wants to know what's the real story between Randy Savage and Vince McMahon? Why won't Vince acknowledge him?
I don't know, because all I know is this. When I first went up there, Savage was doing commentary. When I first started working for WWE, it was this summer of '93, and this was, I guess, when he left anybody help me in the Peanut Gallery. Sometime early in '94, I think it was, because I remember we were in Pennsylvania doing a television, and suddenly I got pressed into being the co-host of the show for 6 weeks. he left to, I guess, go down. Well, did he go down south right away?
I think so.
Yeah.
So,
So that would have been maybe 95. Whatever. I'm sure all you guys are. Point is, Savage up and left with no notice. That's the only thing that I know that he ever did. I don't know the source of any other heat. I've heard rumor, and believe me, I would love to say that any rumor that you could possibly say about the McMahon family is true. After they screwed me in Louisville, I'll never fucking forgive them. And by the way, I'm the only person in wrestling, when I say never, I mean never. But I can't buy the rumor of anything that Savage did to anybody in the McMahon family.
Peter from Melbourne, Australia. Do you think steroids are in the WWE today? Vince says they aren't.
Well, I mean, they're cracking down simply because of the PR. And the next question, what is your opinion of the wellness policy? Vince never came out and said, okay, well, at least he never did in front of me. Okay, you got to use steroids, you know, whatever. And some guys have said, well, he told me to get bigger, whatever. But let's face it. Vince is up from the Ultimate Warrior to Hulk Hogan. He's always wanted these jacked up bodybuilders, whether they could wrestle or not. Hogan could work in his day. Ultimate Warrior never could. He would be more happy to give a chance to a fucking jacked up bodybuilder that couldn't stick his thumb in his ass on 3 tries than to Jack Briscoe. We all know that. We all know that he was a 62-year-old man on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, a billionaire. If I was a billionaire, I would not do this. I'd have somebody opening my bottle for me and putting it up here. And I would have somebody to rub my throat so I didn't have to swallow it. He's fucking working out to get on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. But the point is, the wellness policy, it's all come about because of public relations. And Vince sees nothing wrong with these guys fucking jacking themselves up and looking like fucking helium hoses have been stuck up their ass for 20 years. And he likes to do it too. And I don't see what the fucking attraction is. So I can't even stand those women bodybuilders with the veins and the fucking, no. I want a little fucking foam rubber there so I'm not bruising myself. But anyway, so it's much less than it has been, but you can always, the guys who are making big money can always beat the fucking test, just like the Olympics, and you guys are going to do what guys want to do. But you can't blame them because of the hiring practices.
OVW. Mookie Ghana of F4W Online. When Kenny Bolin was getting lauded as one of the best non-wrestlers of the half decade, 4 years on the list as of 2005. Is there any talk of bringing him up to WWE?
Absolutely none whatsoever. They didn't watch the OVW TV show when we were working with them, developing their talent. And finally, as a punitive measure, they made Bruce Pritchard start watching the fucking show. The fucking comedy writers, they had never even watched fucking OVW. We sent a tape, but they never watched it. No, they don't understand why Kenny gets over. Kenny is classic pro wrestling. His entire life is a pro wrestling promo. And he is a classic, he's a cross between Mr. Haney on Green Acres, Uncle Joe on Petticoat Junction, and fucking Chill Wills, Andy Devine, and the great wrestling stars of days gone by. And no, a manager that can cut a promo and fucking make people hate him instantly, or talk people into doing anything he wants, whether they've ever heard of him or not, they have no place for something like that. You gotta hire more lingerie models.
Mark O'Connell says, channeling Dusty Rhodes, cut a promo on Kenny.
Oh my God. Kenny Bolin, you couldn't put me down with a steel-toed boot. Couldn't put me out with a steel-toed boot, but I promise you, unless you get me dinner for free at Applebee's, payback will be hell, Daddy.
Mike Campbell from 411 Me. How do you respond to the comments that Batista made in his book saying he wasn't taught anything in OVW?
Well, I got news for you. You didn't learn anything in OVW, but it wasn't for lack of trying. We tried to beat it into your fucking head. Batista said that because he wanted to buddy. If you noticed, every time somebody buddies up to Helmsley, they get the title. We pushed Batista to the moon. The first time I saw Dave Batista, he could not sell a punch. Alpha had taught him how to write a check. He immediately, in training, tore his bicep because he was so fucking steroided up. And he was off on the sidelines for 3 months, and he got a chance to sit and watch class, and then he was better. And he had an amazing look. He was a good natural athlete. He was a very frail demon. He was always sitting there with his sweatshirt on, and he was always very cold and always very chilly. And should have seen when we brought him up, rose him out of the Ohio River. Oh my God, he was down there going, oh my God, snakes and shit. And he did whatever his wife said for him to do, and he was just a pussy-whipped, fucking frail, fucking quiet demon. But Leviathan, the demon of the deep, the guardian of the gates of hell, the right hand of Satan himself, was the most physically dominant force that had ever been in the promotion, and we smashed him over. He beat everybody. He did no jobs. He beat 2 guys and 3 guys at a time. We made him so our version of the Undertaker, because that's what I was going for. I was going for the Undertaker's next money pay-per-view opponent, because look at the guy. He can't take arm drags in the second match. He's either got to be main event or nothing. So I was shooting for a gimmick that he could, with his limited ability, to be quite honest, that he could perform, that could get over, and it did. And I put him in the ring with Kane, and he's sitting there. I said, tell Glenn what you do. Well, anything you want to do. He just had no oomph to him. Put him in the ring with The Undertaker for the first time in Louisville. All these things drew. Put him in the ring with Big Show. All these things drew money. They sold tickets. He was an attraction, but he was never driven to be a success. He like, oh, I'm sick today or whatever the fuck. So anyway, finally, they take him up there, they put him in a suit and put the box around his neck for Devon, right? You remember that? And they're about ready to fire him, and somehow he starts working out with Hemsley, and all of a sudden he's a top guy. And then all of a sudden he writes a book. He didn't learn anything in OVW. Well, it wasn't for lack of trying. I called him on the phone. I said, Dave Bautista, left a message on his voicemail. I said, I'd like you to call me back and tell me why you say you didn't learn anything. When we took care of you, we liked you, we smashed you over, we did everything we could possibly do for you, and then you come and knock me and Danny Davis. I said, I'd like you to call me and tell me why. In the meantime, fuck you. And I've never heard a goddamn word from him since, and don't really give a fuck whether I ever do.
Let's see with the one Adam K.
Jim Cornette, it's the one Adam K here, and I'm representing the Who Dat Nation. And I want to get your thoughts on Nick Dinsmore. You trained Nick Dinsmore, and what was your impression on the Eugene character? Did you think it had a lot of longevity, or did you think that something like this was going to get a big backlash from a lot of activist groups?
No, I didn't think it was going to get any backlash from activist groups. I thought it was going to end his career, and it pretty much did. I love Nick Dinsmore. When I first went to OVW, he was the standout guy there. He, Doug Basham, Rob Conway, and Danny Basham, Danny Holly, the Damage Up, were Danny Davis's 4 core original students, the guys that he had built his promotion around, and they were all talented, and I used them in various positions over 4 or 5 years, and Nick was great. He wasn't the greatest promo in the world, but he could get the job done after a while. He looked good, looked like an athlete, he could teach wrestling or perform wrestling. I brought Chris Benoit down. They went 20 minutes at the Louisville Gardens, tore the house down. They wouldn't look at him. I fucking put him in a program with Doug Basham. Here we're drawing money, and especially in the summer at the Six Flags shows, we're drawing money in a wrestling school with these guys on top. They wouldn't look at him. I said, why the fuck can we not get Nick Dinsmore up to the main roster and make him some money? He just doesn't have anything. He's too plain. One time I rated number 1 through number 20. Who should go to the main roster? Who is ready to graduate? And there's Dinsmore at number 1, and they took number 17, 18, and 19. I think it was Orlando Jordan, Mark Jindrak, and who the fuck else, who knows. So what else to fucking do? And then all of a sudden, he's up there as Eugene. I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but he's a retard. Roughhouse Fargo was my favorite wrestler when I was 9 years old, but he only came in at Christmas time. And then he went back and refereed to Sonny Fargo for the Crockett's, and you waited for 6 months or a year for Roughhouse Fargo to come back and sell out. You can't have a retard on television every week as a babyface, especially when he accidentally got over. They didn't want him to get over, but he got over because he started outsmarting the fucking heels, and people like a retard that outsmarts the heels because that makes them look even stupider. But then when they start fucking outsmarting him, what does that take? Because he can't even spell his own fucking name. Short-term shelf life, and now he's pigeonholed as Eugene. I'd love to have Nick in Ring of Honor, but I can't with a straight face bring that up because the stink of Eugene is still on Nick Dinsmore, who could have been the next version of a Chris Benoit or a great professional worker like that, and instead they gave him a career-killing gimmick like they've done so many other guys, and the Spirit Squad, half those guys quit the business. Johnny Jeter moved from San Diego to Louisville, 3,000 miles, everything he owned in the trunk of his car when he was 19 years old. Waited tables at Chili's to pay for his wrestling school tuition. Becomes way farther advanced than anybody should have been at his age. Becomes a Ricky Morton for the 21st century, in shape, with fire and can sell. And by the time they finish with him, he's up there for a year and a half. He goes home, quits the business. They run more people out of the fucking business. And now, once again, the question: Nick Dinsmore? No, it finished his career. Everybody will look at him as Eugene, and nobody wants that in their promotion if they want to be serious.
El Matador, Figure 4 Online. Was there a specific point in the OVW-WWE relationship where you realized that everything was fucked and wasn't going to work?
Well, where I should have realized, as soon as Jim Ross retired from the job as Vice President of Talent Relations and tagged off, handed it to John Laurinaitis. Talk about fucking going down the home stretch and fumbling the baton. I should have known then, but I didn't realize right then because I didn't know anybody could be as incompetent and as deceitful and as totally disregarding of anybody else's business as John Laurinaitis turned out to be. But once they started pulling people that were promised to us and firing people out from under us, we'd have champions, guys holding belts. They would fire them and then call us and tell us about it. And then they'd also have told those guys, don't go back to work for insurance reasons. Or, you know, call me on Tuesday, use this guy on TV. TV when? TV tomorrow. TV tomorrow's written. Well, use him anyway. Well, fuck you. I don't have 15 secretaries. I have to do this shit myself. We had TV written 3 days ago, like you ought to. It just lying about guys that were promised that weren't coming, not wanting us to do business. I could go on and on. That could be a whole nother videotape. But John Laurinaitis, the guy who signed the wrong one-legged man, the guy who basically has plummeted the developmental program into the sewer, the guy who is a laughing stock as far as a talent relations administrator who is there because Stephanie likes him because he says yes to anything related to Stephanie. Yeah, that was the beginning and the end of the OVW-WWE relationship.
All right, it's time for a game. It's the shit list, the Jim Cornette shit list. I'm going to go through names.
That was a great song, by the way. Pillman used the song Shit List in ECW. I do know that much.
Was it a country song?
No, you've never heard that? You made my shit list. Yeah,
No.
Yeah, it's all right anyway. Somebody knows it, I'm sure.
You got it? Okay. So I'm going to present you with a name. If they're on the shit list, they go on the board. If not, I'll toss it aside if they're irrelevant. Then once we get the handful of names here, you can rank them 1 through 5.
Okay.
You have a very lengthy shit list. You claim last time we were together that it's gotten shorter. I doubt that after the last 4.5 hours together.
People might be shitty with me, but I don't really care about some people anymore. I just decided as I get older, I'm not going to tolerate bullshit, and I'm going to say what I fucking think, because fuck it.
Certainly we can get 5 names, but let's fill this side here. Vince McMahon.
Well, he'd be on it.
He'd be on the shit list.
Vince McMahon never did anything to me personally. It's just all the minions and stooges that he hired that did perpetrate shit, and he allowed them to get away with it.
Well, that qualifies.
Therefore,
Eric Bischoff.
I'm really ambivalent about Bischoff one way or the other.
Very good.
You know.
Very good. Mark Madden.
Well, we'll put him over here because I'm not sure if he's 2 or 3.
Okay. That didn't take long. Wade Keller.
Let's put him on standby.
Because we're not sure if we're going to use him.
I'm not even sure now if he makes the top 5.
Okay. Hardcore Wrestling.
Well, now that's not really a person or a place. It's more of a thing. Okay, well,
that's on the shit list, though.
Let's stick it up there on standby. Stick it up there on standby. This thing's gonna fall over pretty soon. Spared no expense on this fucking set here.
Got to see our budget. New York.
Oh no, you know, no. With all these other competition, I still don't understand the traffic or the smog or the fact that the pedestrians won't get the fuck out of the way of a moving car. But nah, just
really, wow, that one is shocking to me. I thought that would have had the top spot. Dairy Queen.
I love Dairy Queen. Now, if you made it Dairy Queen in Hyden, Kentucky, after a really lousy spot show with a rude window person, but otherwise, nah, I'm a Dairy Queen fan. Oh, you got to stick him over there. Yeah, you got to stick him over there.
You notice I'm leaving a lot of room because I figure we're gonna. Okay, Bubba the Love Sponge.
Actually, no, I want to put him on my hit list because after he played part of my Who Slammin' Who podcast on his satellite radio show. Not only did he not refute any of the points I made about how shitty he and the TNA show was, but also I got 30,000 more hits and set a record downloads the following week. So actually, I need to send Bubba a Christmas card.
Okay.
Yeah, I went over 100,000 for the first time.
Joey Styles.
You know, once again, Styles' momentary fucking pain in the ass during the middle of the election when we're trying to take a step. Like, America was like wrestling. We were trying to take a step into the 21st century, but a bunch of fucking people who didn't really see that were trying to hold us back. Joey Styles was just proposing their point of view, but I don't have anything against the guy as a person. He was just such an easy target because, you know, when you get the conservative Christian crackpots going, you really don't have much trouble taking the piss out of us, as Adrian Street used to say.
Paul Heyman.
I don't know whether he can go on my shit list because this has to be reserved for people that I have no respect for in any way, shape, or form. And while Paul's and I's personal business dealings have been rather fucking checkered, at the same time, I can go ahead and say that he does know what he's doing, that he was a good booker, etc., etc. This is for pure shit.
And
I will live. By the way, I told Dutch Mantel to put this in his book. I don't know if he did or not, because Dutch, you haven't sent me the free one yet. I sent you my address. I will live. I'm making it a point. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm on my low-carb diet and trying to stay away from sugar, etc., because I want to live to stand over and piss upon Vince Russo's grave. For the fans that he's deprived of seeing fucking great wrestling, for the fucking wrestlers whose careers he's shortened, for the fucking people that make their living in the wrestling business who have had elevated blood pressure or fucking lowered fucking income because of his fucking foolishness. Vince, one of these days, I'm making it a mission now in my life. You're going to go before me. If I have to make it to 93 just so I can stand there and take a whiz on your fucking headstone, pal, fuck you.
Well, it's quite an accomplishment to get him off the Bob Evans turkey gravy.
Exactly.
You're pretty important.
It's got chunks of sausage.
Santino.
I could go on in the whole story, but no, actually I should send him a Christmas card too, because they were pushing my buttons for a year looking for a fucking reason. And when I've smacked him 17 times, it gave him the reason. And immediately my blood pressure did get better, so no, I have no problems.
Kevin Dunn.
Wow. See who else we come up with. We're saving it over there.
Do you have a quick Kevin Dunn impersonation you'd like to do? A few people have done it on Ken.
Yes, sir. We're not wrestling. And I don't know why you think we're wrestling. Just because we're wrestlers in wrestling boots and wrestling tights in a wrestling ring.
Fuck you.
Jim Herd.
Oh boy, Jiminy Pete. I can tell you already, just because he's just, he's a fucking little slime, but just because he's more inoffensive, we gotta stick at it. God damn!
Yeah, it's gonna fill up. ICP.
You know what? That whole thing was blown up out of proportion. Bruce Pritchard showed me a video. I'd never heard of these fucking people. I only listen to music, so why should I have heard of these people? In like 1997, he shows me a videotape of the Japanese hardcore IWA, which I don't watch anyway, but there's Terry Funk and there's Cactus Jack but these fucking people, whoever the fuck they are in their real lives, are doing the commentary. They gave everybody phony names and they're making a joke out of the wrestling business. And Bruce just thought it was hilarious because he likes funny, silly shit. I didn't think it was fucking funny. And when I found out that the Insane Clown Posse were fucking musicians, if I can use that term loosely, then I thought, look, I don't come and fucking make fun of music. Why are you making fun of my business? I was there the night that Victor Quinones, the promoter, and Cactus Jack walked up to him and said, "Where's our check for that tape that you sold?" And to their credit, they cut him a fucking check right on the fucking spot, but I think they make fun of the business. It's that hardcore bullshit. I've seen videotapes of these juggernauts or juggalos or whatever in a mud field fucking watching this shit where they fucking, I don't know, it's like a David Letterman stupid pet trick, but it's humans. I don't get the whole fucking thing. Stay out of my business, I'll stay out of your business.
They're not on the show.
But nah, they're not that important.
Very good. Hulk Hogan.
No, once again, no. I mean, it's sad now that the guy who, except for Austin and Rock, has set more records, made more money, got to be a bigger celebrity, etc. in our business now because of, family situations, divorces and whatever, has to fucking go out there and do that at 60 years old with artificial body parts, trying to convince people that he's going to get a fucking company over when he's never been a booker and he's never gotten a company over. He's been a star. Should have stuck with it.
Rap music.
Oh, heavens to Murgatroyd. There we go. It's got to be way up there.
7 Up.
Not in this company. Although 7-Up does have an aftertaste that Sprite, does not have.
I bet. John's ending.
No.
Okay,
Not even. We don't have any
let's
copies.
rank these guys now. Now the work begins.
Oh, Jesus. Well, actually, what I said about it, I wasn't going to put Paulie up there because I can respect him for some things he's done. Vince McMahon has been, I'll take the cheap shit off. Vince McMahon has been very successful, even though he allowed his minions to fuck me around.
Very good.
I can't do it. Hardcore wrestling is more of not a person or a thing, it's more of a fucking, what's the word I'm searching for? An entity concept. I think we gotta go with people who just have no redeeming value whatsoever. 2, 3, 4, 4. Oh shit! Wait.
Who do you got? You got another idea? You want to add one? John Laurinaitis. You want to add one? Get a pen. Let's add.
Well, once again, not even important.
Not important enough.
I got to say we're gonna have to throw Wade off the fucking page because I think right here, if you want to go in this direction right here, you have the 5 worst enemies of the professional wrestling business and the professional wrestling fan, and between the 5 of them, they ain't worth goddamn shit. So, as my mother used to say, they don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. They don't have any talent or haven't had any talent for anything related to professional wrestling. No redeeming quality. Can anybody in this room, I'm holding up, name something in professional wrestling that any of these people have done well? Great angle, great promo, great performance, great something. The camera's not on you. You're nameless, you're faceless.
Oklahoma.
Give me anything that any of these people have done.
Oklahoma.
Great. I said great.
Stay employed.
Yeah.
A lot of people without jobs. Stay employed.
That's an art right there.
Stay employed.
Sold a lot of pizza.
Made money.
Heavyweight champion.
Got hired. Initially made that transition from...
Somebody said he had a heart attack. I find that hard to believe. You'd had to find a heart.
Well, that's it.
There you
That's
go.
the shit list. That's the shit list. Might not be a bad idea for a column if you ever wanted to write for USA Today or New York Times.
Do you think if I wanted to dwell on these people all the fucking time, see, you just do this to stir me up. If I wanted to dwell on these people all the time, I'd need goddamn be hospitalized.
Well, you can critique things in society, politics, healthcare plans.
But now, why didn't you have a positive top 5? Why didn't you have Jim Cornette's top 5 of all time, the Bobby Heenans or the Mick Foleys or the fucking Ric Flairs or the fucking Christine Jarrett's or fucking Bill Wattses or all the people that I admire and like and that have done things for me and other people and the rest, but no, you have to go for that seamy underbelly of the wrestling business.
You had 4 hours to talk about all the wonderful things.
Well, you
in
rushed me
wrestling.
through everything.
Wait till the next 4. You think this was bad?
You rushed me right through. I couldn't go into any detail.
TNA. We'll start it with...
Wait a minute. Why would it be?
With a video.
Jimmy Cornette, the Bulldozer, coming at you live from the OffTheMarkShow.com studios, Daddy. What I want to know is, there was a point in time where you made your long-awaited, epic TNA debut, and it was one for the ages. Because I remember what happened. You got a little excited yourself, sir, and the king went the crowd. I want to know, how tough was it for you to walk back to the locker room? Because I know you just came back from surgery. And also,
Was it a tad embarrassing for you, sir?
Well, actually, it wasn't as tough for me to walk back as it was to walk down that ramp. Here's the deal. I just had the knee surgery, and I was still ACL tied up and everything. I was still walking with a cane, and I debuted in June of '06, and it was 150 degrees in the impact zone. And all day I'd been doing the Charlie Chaplin thing, spinning the cane around, you know. So I decided as I go out on the stage and I get a good pop, I'm gonna milk it, and I'm doing this, but my hand is covered with sweat. The foam thing on the cane is sweaty, and it just straight out. And I expected to look over and see some old woman, you know. Like, I said, okay, now I got to go down the ramp, right? And everybody backstage is like, is he gonna go? Is he? And I just whoops, okay. So very flat-footed. I don't need no stinging cane. Get down there, cut the promo, and fucking then get out of the ring and walk back flat. It was a good promo. I wasn't embarrassed. I was tickled by it, you know, more than anything. And actually, some people even thought that I meant to do it. And I let them believe that for a while.
Kyle Sands, did you ever have a bowel movement at the TNA Impact Zone?
What, in the bathroom, or you mean just?
I take it that's what he wants to know.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I used to go to the bathroom as often as possible so that I fucking calm myself down from choking Russo or fucking walking out, getting the car and leaving.
Greg Pike, do you think TNA will ever charge admission for fans to get into TNA Impact Zone?
No, but they are planning on charging for you to get out. So.
Paul Miller, courtesy of F4W Online, with Jerry Jarrett having done so well as a booker in Memphis, why do you think that didn't translate into more success with TNA?
Well, as I know, or as I'm aware, Jerry only wrote the first, 15, 20 shows.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
Jerry was not the booker there very long. And also, did you see anything wrong when Jerry Jarrett left the company? Could you sense something was wrong? I wasn't even there. And to be quite honest, did you ever see Dixie Carter get lost while she was wandering around backstage? No, but I hoped on several
That's
occasions.
from Cornette fan, courtesy of Classics.
But no, here's the thing with Jerry Jarrett and TNA, you know, he started the thing as the pay-per-view, Wednesday night pay-per-view, and then they got television, and then blah, 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 but he was only in the first 6 months or so, and then the direction took a different turn, so I don't, what was the second part of that? I don't really, and I wasn't around at that point. To be honest, I never watched TNA wrestling until, I'm going to say, 4 weeks before I debuted in June of '06, because I still, WWE and me got sideways in July of '05, but I still had an ownership interest in Ohio Valley Wrestling, and so I was still making money off of them. Plus, I was really pissed off at wrestling, and besides Ring of Honor and reunions with the Midnight Express, I wouldn't really want to do anything, and I was waiting on to clear up the OVW TV rights and get a check, so I didn't want to fucking jack that around too much. So basically, I had never watched any TNA because I knew that Vince Russo was involved in it, and I thought there's no reason for me to make myself mad in my own home. And then when he was gone, I just was in the habit of not watching it, so I didn't. But Dutch Mantell had called me a number of occasions. I said, when I get all this straightened out, and I get my knee surgery, finally time was right. So then I was like, oh shit, I better start watching this stuff because I don't know what's going on. And so I watched it, and I liked the show, and I thought it had a lot of potential, and there was guys there, boom, boom, boom. And then, I guess it was late September, Dutch calls and says, well, we made some changes in the creative team. I said, oh, great, good, what? Well, we fired everybody but me and Jeff. I said, well, that's probably a step in the right direction. He said, and we hired one guy. I said, who's that? He said, Vince Russo. What? Vince Russo. Why? He can't explain it. Nobody said this. By the way, I've asked so many people that have been around so much longer than I, why? Nobody can explain it. Nobody knows. Jeff Jarrett wanted him there. So I said, have Jeff call me. So Jeff called me. I said, this won't work. I don't know why. I'm speechless. I'll just give it a chance. All right, I didn't want to do it on the phone. So I went down the next taping and sat down with Jeff and Dutch and gave my notice. I said, it's going to detract from business. I can't be around this fucking guy. He'll kill everything he touches. I don't want to be involved in it. Let one of your heel, let Abyss, it was a heel in, lay me out, boom, I'll be done. And Jeff basically said, oh, if you no-show, or if you don't come, you're no-showing, I won't accept your notice. Tried it, blah, 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 blah. So that's what happened.
Halloween Havoc 89, courtesy of Wrestling Classics, says, what is the best part of the new TNA of 2010? What is the worst part of the new TNA of 2010? got a couple hours. What would you like to see show up? Who would you like to see show up in TNA that is on the WWE roster?
Boy. The worst part of the new TNA of 2010, everything. The best part of the new TNA of 2010, nothing. Here's why. I don't even care if anybody else shows up in TNA, it's on the WWE roster. It doesn't make a fuck to me. Here's the problem. The problem is, to me, they had a chance to say, okay, we're going to make a statement. We're going to be a new promotion for the 21st century. We're going to fight to get the fucking fans back from the UFC and MMA. We're going to fucking take these guys that we've got on our roster that are young, and we're going to push them, and we're going to get them over, and we're going to use them, the bodies of the older stars to do that while they still are capable. They've got a crew of main eventers that needs to be packed in ice after every performance. I've been saying that to them for a year. Kurt Angle is a machine. He's incredible, but the injuries that he's had, he doesn't need to be wrestling 30-minute matches every night carrying a company on his back. I wanted to see him push the young guys. I wanted to see him do a more serious style. I wanted to see him do an alternative to Vince McMahon, a more credible, logical style, but of course that means getting rid of fucking Vince Russo. And they get rid of everybody but Vince Russo, and I hate to keep harping on this. There they come down now from the heavens to strike me down.
He's got a direct line.
But the problem is Vince Russo's incapable of writing anything that approximates sports. He's incapable of writing anything that anybody can believe. But if they had done that, if every restaurant in the world sold hamburgers, why would you want to open up a restaurant selling hamburgers? You want to open up a restaurant selling chicken. And with Vince selling at least having the best marketing on hamburgers, it may not be the best hamburgers, but McDonald's sells the most hamburgers. They ain't the best, but they sell a lot of them. With Vince doing that, open up a chicken restaurant. Let's have some realistic, credible, sports-based presentation to our wrestling. Let's not be so fucking WWE light and do shit with a less of a budget and less talented people involved in the writing of the thing and copy WWE. Let's do something completely different. So when I saw January 4th, it made me glad that I was gone, because let's face it, if I hadn't been fired or released or terminated or whatever you want to call it in September, I would have been gone in October of my own volition. As soon as I figured out that not only are we never getting rid of Russo, but now we're having these other guys come in and put another company out of business 10 years ago. And they're 10 years older. And it's more of the fucking same. Hogan and Bischoff on the January 4th show, when they're in the ring, it's going to be great. It's going to be... They look like they were trying to talk themselves into it. They look like two quasi-celebrities on a fucking fundraising telethon for a goddamn hurricane disaster. I expect to see Hogan say George Bush doesn't like black people. It was fucking embarrassing. And over on the other channel, you got Vince McMahon and Bret Hart. Bret Hart was a fucking legend. Vince McMahon is the boss, but it's a bunch of gray-haired guys yelling at each other about shit that happened 15 years ago. The TNA program made all of their young guys like Beer Money, Matt Morgan, Hernandez, etc. meaningless in favor of guys that have had their best years behind them. Maybe they've done a lot in the business before, but goddamn, it's time to move on. And so the answer is blah. No, TNA had a chance to do something and they fumbled the fucking ball and they ain't gonna get it back.
Well, that answers Todd Packard's question.
Thank you, Todd.
The January 4th show. Clips courtesy of Figure 4. Ask him if the only reason he still slags TNA off is so he can fit the phrase "shine a turd." It's one of his sentences.
Well, it's the phrase "you can't polish a turd." However, after watching TNA of late, I will say that they've increased. As a matter of fact, they bought a Times Square billboard. They hired Hulk Hogan for untold hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and Eric Bischoff and all these other guys. And they've gone all the way from a 1 to a 1.2 or 3. Imagine that. I said recently, if a lot of people are looking at a turd, does it still stink?
Jay Zaretsky from Ontario asked, when TNA is out of business, maybe and hopefully by the time this DVD comes out, will you allow yourself to be interviewed for the inevitable rise and fall of TNA DVD?
Now I have a feeling that there'll be enough video evidence out there. You know, here's the thing. I don't want TNA to fail. I wanted TNA to succeed. That's why I went to work there, because Vince McMahon cannot be allowed to have a monopoly on the professional wrestling business. And then he's embarrassed to admit he's even in the pro wrestling business, so he calls it a monopoly on the sports entertainment business. For the sake of the wrestlers, for the sake of the fans, for the sake of everybody who makes a living in this business, except the billionaire who don't need any more money, you can't be allowed to have a monopoly. There always has to be a place to go, another choice, an alternative. I wanted TNA to be that because it seemed like they had the best advantage toward doing that. They had national television, they had monthly pay-per-view, they had a good crew. You could always have better talent, but they had a good crew. They had everything they needed except a direction and a way to implement that made them stand apart from the WWE, and a guy who respected the business ultimately writing the show. And I kept hanging around waiting and waiting and waiting. Sooner or later, somebody's going to smarten up and see this. People laugh at him behind his back in the production meeting every time that they read his fucking drivel that he writes. Eyes roll on the production crew, from the talent side, from the agents. And it just never got any better. And I'm gobsmacked. I don't know how he does it. Nobody I can ask that have been in the business 20 years knows how he does it. But TNA could have been the alternative to Vince, and now, boy, you know, on January 4th, when they cut to that crowd shot of Dixie Carter, I figure you look at the phrase buyer's remorse in the dictionary, you have to see her picture. Because what the fuck is she? It's just, Dutch like this. I said one time, I told Dutch Mantel, I said, you know what? I said, the people that know how don't have the money, and the people that have the money don't have a fucking clue how. And unfortunately, I guess it's that way with everything.
Ring of Honor. This would be an 8-hour release if we did 4 hours on wrestling and 4 hours or so in this. Well,
Mr. Cornette, you are with Ring of Honor now, but you had another tenure with Ring of Honor. And during that time period, there was one of the greatest feuds on the indies. It was ROH versus CZW. Take us behind the locker room. Take us to the booking meetings. How did that whole thing play out? Was there any heat between the boys? Was John Zandig the douche I always read that he is? Come on, tell us about that feud. The internet wants to know.
Well, I wasn't in on any of the booking meetings. At the time, Gabe Sapolsky was the booker in Ring of Honor. And he said, well, we're thinking about doing this thing. And basically, I mean, I almost feel like I'm, you know, my God, everybody, you can't expose the wrestling business anymore, but there was such a great passion and emotion in the Ring of Honor and Combat Zone Wrestling thing that I almost feel like I'm, you know, telling kids there was no Santa Claus, say there wasn't really any unprofessional conduct. But at the same time, there was a lot of shooting going on. Because I think that's why it got over, because the fans, remember what I said, Jared always said, you know, when he had Lawler and Dundee, working a program with each other, the fans knew Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee didn't like each other because they told the fans, whether they were partners, both baby faces, one of them's a heel, fighting each other, whatever, they told the fans at the arena, they told the fans at the convenience store after the matches, you know, they didn't like each other. And Jarrett used that, and they sold out year after year when he put them against each other because the fans knew there was an element there, they were going to beat the piss out of each other. I think hardcore wrestling is the most ridiculous, fucking inane, stupid thing that I've ever seen in my life. And I talked about ECW, you know, they only scratched the surface. This Combat Zone Wrestling bullshit, the broken light tubes, the fluorescent light tubes, the fucking barbed wire, the staple gun, I mean, just anything about it. I think it's fucking ridiculous. I think anybody that perpetrates it has to have their head examined. I think anybody that promotes it ought to be put in fucking jail. That Ian Rotten in the state of Kentucky. Now, the state of Kentucky used to have one of the easiest athletic commissions in the world to get along with. $5 license and fucking have a promoter's license, they wouldn't even send an inspector. Because of Ian Rotten and his hardcore wrestling getting on the news, people being splattered with blood, guy almost bled to death because he got punctured by a fucking fluorescent light tube, was taken to the hospital, hardcore wrestling invades state. All of a sudden now there's inspectors and there's rules and regulations. You can't have any blood, even accidental blood. Match must end immediately. You'll lose your promoter's license. The licenses cost a fortune more. We immuned the people to simple angles that they could fucking believe that a guy could work and you could still believe he was hurt. It doesn't take any talent to take blunt instruments and bash each other over the fucking head for real in front of 200 people at a goddamn parking lot of a fucking bowling alley for $20 if you get paid at all. It made the fucking business look bad. It made the boys... When I saw The Wrestler, I went into a 3-day depression. Because here are people who may not know anything about professional wrestling for the last 20 years since Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania, or I remember Ric Flair or whatever. And now they're thinking, oh my God, that's what happened to all those guys. And now professional wrestling is in a goddamn fucking VFW hall and all the people... I don't even take independent bookings. Because I'm afraid if I go to a fucking show that there's only 200 people at, and I've got my gimmick table out, people look at me and say, oh, now he needs the money too. Fuck, it's fucking embarrassing. It's embarrassing that the average person would say, oh, he would hear that somebody's being stapled with a fucking staple gun, or ripped up with broken glass, or doing this fucking foolishness. It takes no talent, it takes no art. The people that fucking go and pay to see it, I have serious doubts about their fucking mental capacity. That you would think that's fucking entertainment, which taxes the very definition of the word. And the whole thing is fucking ridiculous. And it's, what if you were a basketball fan and all your life you loved basketball? You got a tickle out of the Harlem Globetrotters, but I mean, at least it was still a fucking athletic fucking show. But mostly you like the Boston Celtics or the goddamn whatever the fuck. And all of a sudden they come up with new rules for basketball. Like I'm sure Vince Russo would like to write. Where you've got to make the inbounds pass through across a flaming table. And if you got to shoot a free throw, you got to shoot it over a fucking 3 coils of barbed wire. And there's a guy on the fucking top of the goddamn basket that's going to fucking try to spear the ball and puncture it and throw a spear at you and whatever the fuck. People, what the fuck is this? Why would anybody want to be involved in this? Why the fuck would anybody want to be involved in a situation where they're going to be ripped up with barbed wire, bashed with fucking light tubes, cut with broken glass, snapped with mouse traps, and hit with a fucking staple gun? I made $15,000 for fucking WrestleMania. I took one bump and it was a shitty one because Luger threw a shitty punch. I made $10,000 for jumping off that fucking scaffold and regretted that. And somebody's going to do that shit to themselves for $20 because, like Ian Rotten, they have some kind of inordinate need to be somebody in front of a few fucking deluded fucking delinquent fucking people at a goddamn bowling alley in fucking West Fuckwad, Indiana. It just makes everybody in our business look like fucking morons. And that's what I conveyed in the Ring of Honor fucking CZW angle, and meant every fucking word of it, and people loved it because they bought it because they knew it was real.
Very good, Zach.
But everybody involved was professional. Even though Zandig couldn't say suey if the hogs had him, I blistered him on the fucking promo. But how can you defend the indefensible?
Zach Lambert, when you first made an appearance in Ring of Honor back in 2003, did you think it would grow into the company it is today?
I did not. I was hoping so, but to be honest, I thought, it was a good independent show, and I thought, this was going to be a good independent show. But now, that's why I've always been a fan of theirs. I always got along well with Kerry. I've never had any problems with Gabe. Like Adam Pearce, the booker, all the people that work there, the guys, they always work hard. That's why I'm there now. But that's why I'm saying, I guess I've always felt there's needed to be an alternative. I was hoping TNA would be that because they were best equipped financially, but they're not going to be. So, the next day after the TNA thing happened, Kerry called me and they'd gotten the television, they'd gone through the pay-per-view thing. I think they put the cart before the horse. I think it's hard to have pay-per-view before you have television. TNA found that out. But I would have never dreamed they'd be on national television on HDNet, 7 years later. And I never dreamed they'd still be a high-profile company and actually being more high-profile with big shows in New York and etc. So I'm happy, but I didn't think that at the time.
Ring of Honor, it's finally come to the big time. It's on HDNet. But Jimmy, I've got to be honest, I really liked Ring of Honor back in the day. The likes of Loki, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Spanky. I know you don't like the name Spanky, but hey, Spanky, it's kind of funny. Anyway, I want to know, what did you think about Ring of Honor then versus now? And also, do you have any booking power now, or are you strictly an on-air talent, per se?
Per se. I like the way you per se. Adam Pearce is the booker, but I obviously can make suggestions, and that's what my job is. Executive producer can be anything, and whether it's open up a new market for live events, or if I've got a connection to find a sponsorship or somebody to help promote, or, you know, hey, I think we could do this on television, they're listening and they're letting me do that because I want the company to succeed. Not doing it for the money at this point. I'm doing it because I want there to be an alternative. I know everybody, like, you know, when Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels were in Ring of Honor. I did too. I thought they were great. But if you notice, you never get a new star over until another star leaves, until the old star leaves. So when they went on their way, then along came the Briscoes and Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness, and everybody, wow, these guys. Well, now Bryan and Nigel have left. Thank God Briscoes are around. But here comes Austin Aries and Tyler Black. Tyler Black's 23 years old. Fuck, he's hardly been able to legally vote for fucking 2 years. You know, I think he's going to be a star. I think a lot, Roderick Strong. I don't want to leave anybody out. I want to say a lot of names, but Brent Albright I've always been a big fan of. Daivari just started. Sean Daivari just started the last TV tapings. He was very underutilized in a variety of ways. You can never get a big star over until the previous star leaves. Jackie Fargo had to hand the torch to Jerry Lawler. Bruno Sammartino had to pass it off to, well, he didn't pass it to Bob Backlund. But you know what I'm saying. So basically, guys are always going to move. They're always going to go on to another job, or bigger and better, or sometimes smaller and lesser. But ultimately, I think Ring of Honor has proven that they are a new style of wrestling. They let the wrestlers do their shit, and they let the fans decide who they like, and then we go from there. And I want to keep doing that. I want to steal some of the UFC fans. I want to steal some of the MMA fans. I want to take the young 20-something, maybe 30-something guys that don't have the big national names, but they got hunger and they got talent, and I want to try to help create a framework where wrestling, I want to do pro wrestling as it was done in the 80s with guys that were born in the 80s. Imagine that. Treat it seriously, be logical, let the guys go out and be themselves and get over, sell the guys based on their personalities and not a bunch of fucking hokey gimmicks, and don't insult people's attention or insult people's intelligence and just start slapping them in the face that we're phony, it's all a show, fucking cartoon. No. Why do you think they like UFC? It's real, yes, but it's also because we understand it. I know this guy, I know that guy, I know why they're going to fight, let's see who's going to win. That's the basis of pro wrestling. So anyway.
All right, another video. Stephen M.
This is going to take a long
Jersey.
fucking time, ain't it?
Hello, Mr. Cornette, James E. Cornette, Jim Cornette, whichever you prefer to be called. I'm a big fan of you, and I'm glad that you have come back to the Ring of Honor crew. I actually have 2 questions for you. If you can't answer both, that's perfectly fine. The first one I'd like to say is that we all know John Cena is the main guy in WWE. But who in ROH do you think could be the next John Cena, and why? And I guess the other question would be, is that who in WWE do you feel is not getting the deserving push that they should, and why?
Okay, well, first of all, I would never say somebody else is going to be the next John Cena. I know what he's asking, who's going to be the next big star? Because to me, everybody ought to be individuals. The reason why wrestlers don't get over better than they do now these days is because they got writers putting words in their mouth. They can't get themselves over. I think Tyler Black is a superstar waiting to happen, but he's too young right now. He needs more seasoning. He needs more time, but you get a 27, 28-year-old Tyler Black, athletically as good as he is, but then getting this up here, and I think you got a superstar. The Briscoes as a tag team are unique. I love their promos, which everybody's, the Briscoes can't talk. No, the Briscoes are the most legitimate, real, credible promo in professional wrestling today, because they sound they talk, they do their promo exactly like they talk. You can't tell the difference between on and off camera, and they're naturals. So I love that, and they're unique once again. So, and secondly, what was the second part of his question?
Was it stars in?
It was
underutilized in WWE.
Underutilized in WWE. I don't want to call any names right now, because that would stooge me that I'd never watch the fucking TV show because it gives me gas. But all the guys that were in OVW developmental from 2002 until 2005, Just write all their names down.
Very good. Mark Berry, will Ring of Honor ever start doing house shows in the South? I think that St. Louis, Nashville, Memphis, and Atlanta would be great stops for you guys.
Bada bing, Charlotte, North Carolina. April the 3rd, you may be watching this after that, but the Big Bang takes place April 3rd, and the reason why that we chose Charlotte, North Carolina, just an example, all the big-time independent shows in the Carolinas, which was a rich wrestling market over the past several years that have drawn big crowds, have been Legends-based shows. Mm-hmm. We think that the fans that loved wrestling in the Carolinas, we were predisposed to like wrestling, and the new fans that like wrestling and haven't seen anything that they like lately, all of them will like Ring of Honor. The Big Bang, it all begins again. Pro wrestling explodes into the 21st century. After Charlotte, we got our eyes, we're doing the paperwork to get promoters' licenses in Kentucky. WrestleMania next year is going to be taking place in Atlanta, and Ring of Honor sort of has a little tradition. I think a lot of those towns, we want to open up more live markets. I've talked to a lot of people who have experience promoting local wrestling shows and have done very well with it, and we're going to start using those people to help us. And so the South and the Midwest and all parts in between is on the roster.
Very good. Mark O'Connell, what are your thoughts on Ring of Honor suing Ric Flair?
Well, and you phrased it nicer than this guy up here did, but it's the same question. You know, I wasn't here. That was before I started. I'm not sure what the situation was. Basically, I understand that Rick was paid money in advance to make appearances, that then once that Vince found out that Ring of Honor was on television, you may remember Vince McMahon doesn't have a fucking clue of what's going on in the professional wrestling business anywhere other than his own company. Then he said, well, I don't think you got to be doing the TV, and Rick didn't do the TV, and apparently the money didn't get paid back. I don't want to get in the middle of it. I like Kerry Silk, and he's a friend of mine. I believe what he says, but Ric Flair has helped me a lot in my career, gave me my first booking job, recommended me for the highest paying job I ever had, which was not, by the way, working for Vince McMahon. So I don't want to get in the middle of them, but I think it's a shame that a guy with the reputation and just the man, Ric Flair, is having problems with wrestling promoters when probably I would say that for 20 years, if you were a wrestling promoter, the most dependable thing that you could hear, the best thing you could hear on your card was, I got Ric Flair, because you knew he was going to be there, you knew he was going to tear the house down, you knew you were going to sell some tickets. Now shit's going sideways, and I hate to see it.
Volume 1 is in the
Volume
books.
1. And I was being brief, folks. I'm sorry.